Can we please mute if we're not talking? That'd be great. If you could please mute. Thank you so much. I want to just welcome everyone to the inaugural Ideas and Priorities hearing being held by the Baltimore City Delegation. And I just want to say, welcome to December of 2020 to everyone that's joining us today. We made it. There's a few more days to go, a few more weeks to go. It has been quite a year, but we want to prepare for the 2021 session of the Maryland General Assembly by granting an opportunity for our neighbors and constituents to share some of their ideas and priorities that they would like us to be thinking about as we go into the next session. My name is Stephanie Smith. I'm a delegate representing the 45th District, and I currently chair the Maryland, the city delegation to the Maryland House of Delegates. And I am joined here for the first time by the newest chair of the Senate delegation, Senator Coy McCray of the 45th District, and I want to give him an opportunity not only to bring but to also identify any new members of his delegation leadership team.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's great to be joined by you all. I just first want to recognize my colleagues. I see Senator Mary Washington. I know that Senator Antonio Hayes. I know that Senator Jill Carter. And we at this moment, a little under the weather is our Senate President, Bill Ferguson, and also Senator Charles Sidnor at this time right here. I cannot say how proud we are in reference to the work that we're about to go in to do this upcoming 2021 legislative session. But most importantly, I just wanted to also, on behalf of the Senate delegation, bring greetings to our Mayor-elect, Brandon Scott, our Council President-elect, Nick Mosby, our Comptroller-elect, Bill Henry, and I also see that we're joined by our Madam State's Attorney, our Commissioner, our school CEO. And I want to say thank you for this opportunity again. Look forward to the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you for the divide and conquer and acknowledging our dignitaries so that I do not have to. You've done an able job of that, and I'm very appreciative. We have a lot of people in the House delegation, so I won't belabor the point with acknowledging all that are here, but thank you. Thank you, team, for showing up. And I know a few people couldn't be with us today. So we want to just do a little bit of housekeeping for folks before we get started. There was a deluge of people that wanted to participate and signed up today, because that's human nature. We got some last minute folks that wanted to be on the record. So we want to respect the time of everyone here. So the first testimony we'll be hearing is from our citywide officials. And then after that, we will open it up with public comment from individuals and then with organizations. Individuals and organizations will now at this point, and it's been communicated via email, but I want to take the opportunity to communicate it here. We'll have 2 minutes apiece. That way, we want to keep as many people here listening to you live. So we wanted to preserve everyone's time in that way. So all of our citywide officials will have 5 minutes apiece, and we will let you know once you're at 30 seconds. We'll say 30 seconds, and then we'll say when time's up. And of course, I'll allow everyone to complete a thought. And again, just thank you. This is the leadership of our city, and we're just so gratified to have Mayor-elect and his team here to kick us off. So my ledge director, Lamar Robinson, will be serving as time. So when you hear a male voice saying time, I want you to know who's speaking to you, and that would be Lamar Robinson. So at this point, I would like to give the floor to the next mayor of Baltimore City, Brandon Scott. I'm going to be introducing others to present with you, and each speaker will have a maximum of 5 minutes. And at this point, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Senator McCray. I'm proud of both of you as a 45th District resident, so thank you. I want to say thank you to all of our delegates and senators for all the hard work that you have done and will continue to do, and the dedication to the work ahead, especially as we continue to navigate the new world of through this pandemic and beyond. We have to understand again, and I would be very remiss if I didn't open by saying that we have to continue to let our citizens know that COVID is a very real thing, and that we have to make sure that people are following guidance and abiding by what our public health professionals are saying so that we can keep people healthy and safe. Delegate Smith, I want to thank you in particular for starting this public ideas and priorities hearing process and doing this great service for the people of Baltimore. You know, I am a out of the box thinker, so always love to see things done in a new way, in a more inclusive way. But I also know that I am coming into this position as we are facing some of the most important decisions that our state and our city have ever faced before. And there is none more important than following up the work that you guys did for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, the Kerwin veto override. We have to prioritize this, as you guys have already showing the leadership to doing what we all know is right. I want to thank this delegation for their unanimous support for the Kerwin bill. We all know that we have to override the governor's short-sighted veto, but we're also doing this in a way and also recognize that when this was vetoed, he also vetoed the needed funds for school building. And Doug, we got feedback again. I think somebody is off mute.
Can somebody please mute themselves if they're currently not muted? That's going to be critically important for the next remaining hours. Please mute yourself or I will hunt you down and mute you.
Thank you. I didn't want to make sure that it wasn't on my end. But also, it's also, as you know, important that we know that we also vetoed needed funds for school buildings. From curriculum to school funding for our buildings, our students need to learn in environments worthy of their promise. And we all know that has not been the case. At the city level, I am committed to investing more dollars in our school system, and being a mayor who sees our school system as my responsibility, something that has not happened for far too long in our great city. We must also, however, look at ways that we can improve the Blueprint for Maryland's Future to accommodate the challenges our students, teachers, and school staff are facing due to COVID-19. There are lessons learned and challenges illuminated since session ended that must inform the work ahead. And you guys, the local legislators, as always, are going to be at the forefront of that work. We know this is our responsibility to ensure that our students can be educated and receive the high quality education every single one of them deserves. Ultimately, however, as you are well aware, the tough work is going to begin once the veto is overridden. We have to ensure the recommendations are fully implemented. We have to ensure that we're educating residents about what actually passed. We have to make sure that we're meeting the existing and ongoing technology needs of our students and families. But we also have to do simple things, right? We cannot just provide a better education. We have to make sure that young people are there by doing things like improving attendance rates. And with the serious infrastructure limitations that has been exacerbated and exposed by COVID-19, we have to seriously pursue the creation of a municipal broadband system, expanding broadband infrastructure to all of our neighborhoods and closing the digital divide by ending blatant inequities. Fully investing in our young people, our future, is my top priority. But this is not limited to our students, but also we know that this digital divide is also considering our families and our seniors as well. The second thing that I want to talk about, and we know that Commissioner Harrison will be following up, is we are at a critical moment. As you guys, as the House knows, as the Senate knows, of reimagining what public safety and criminal justice and reform looks like, not just here in our great city and across our state, but across the country. The events of this year have made it more clear for us who have been on the forefront that reimagining public safety must be a top priority. I, like many of you, recognize that we have the opportunity this year to do things that are life-changing. The stars have finally allowed for us to make that deep structural change that we've all been asking for. This is an opportunity for a real change in a new way. We know that we have to, and you will have my support for LEBOR reform. We will remain committed to the consent decree. We will also be asking you guys for support on helping us with our group violence reduction strategy, and also tracking down those individuals who are trafficking guns in our city, into our city. But last, we also have to make sure that we uplift public transportation. when you think about the heroes that are working in our hospitals, we have to make sure the way that they get to work remains there, remains funded, and has dedicated funding, because only when we have a fully invested in 21st century regionally operating transportation system, Baltimore truly be the best city it can be. I look forward to working with you each and every day to make our city a great place, and want to thank you for your time this evening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor-elect. Would you like to introduce the next speaker that will be joining you?
Yes, the next speaker, I think he needs no introduction. It is Commissioner Michael Hutchinson, who will be continuing to lead up the police side of our focus on dealing with violence. And we'll be looking forward to operating in new and innovative ways and furthering our commitment to how we're going to deal with the most pressing issue in Baltimore this side of COVID. We have an ongoing pandemic and an ongoing epidemic at the same time. So, Commissioner Harrison, take it away.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Madam Chair and members of the delegation. Thank you for hosting tonight's session, for inviting us to say a few words about the legislative work in the upcoming session. And most of you and most of the residents of Baltimore know the legislators from the House and Senate have been meeting for months now to fashion a legislative agenda around police reform. And certainly, we're always working on how to deal comprehensively with violent crime. The themes of the conversations and legislative ideas have ranged from developing standard use of force policies to requiring de-escalation to be used and implicit bias training to be provided to all officers. And throughout the discussions, Baltimore City and Baltimore Police Department have been fully engaged and poised to provide insight into the smart reforms the agency has already embraced and implemented. My team and I are fully committed to reforming not only the BPD, but leading the way in reforming the policing profession at the state, local, and even the national level. You may remember that I participated in a national work group with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, consisting of 3 mayors and 3 police chiefs, on the national recommendations on policing reform and racial justice. Just last week, I began working with the 2nd national work group with the National Police Foundation to also produce national recommendations on police reform and police reimagination. So you see right here at home, while other departments around the country are struggling to conceive and then implement reforms that will provide transparency and accountability, we are already 3 years into the reform process through our efforts to implement the country's most expansive consent decree in history. For example, the Baltimore Police Department's policies on use of force, de-escalation, duty to intervene, duty to report have become a national model, as have our first ever community policing plan and our EPIC program. We have now shared these resources with our state partners as well as many police departments around the country. And we'll continue to share additional policies and state-of-the-art training modules as they become approved by the Department of Justice and the consent decree monitoring team. Certainly, we'll continue to work with the legislators and the state chiefs and sheriff's association to replace the LEOBR with smart policies that establish uniform accountability and transparency, such as increasing civilian participation on hearing boards. As you know, we already, through our collective bargaining agreement, provide for 2 civilians to be a part of our boards. After months of training, we are poised to have our first trial board with voting civilian members. We'll be the first in the state of Maryland to take this step. I'm incredibly proud of this work and firmly believe it'll lead to increased accountability that will help mend our relationship with the residents we serve. Then requiring all agencies to adopt policy to investigate all allegations of use of force, regardless of whether the complainant is cooperative or even anonymous, to investigate these allegations completely and produce a final disposition, even if the accused officer resigns. Then requiring the Maryland Police Training Commission to mandate implicit bias and de-escalation training. Implicit bias training should be a standalone training and consideration given to expanding the requirements for early intervention. As part of our suite of policies on use of force, we've adopted policies and implemented training on de-escalation and implicit bias. And lastly, helping agencies across the state to acquire and implement a body-worn camera program and the requisite data storage policies. I like to note that in another area, we are the leaders and ahead of the curve. We mandate the use of body-worn cameras and the storage of that data. And very early on in my tenure, we adopted a policy on how and when to release footage on critical incidents. Certainly, there are many other topics that need to be included in the policies to replace LEOBR, but my team and I are ready to continue this work with all of you, all of your colleagues, and certainly with our Mayor-elect Scott. We're committed to protecting our residents, our officers, and ensuring that policing is done fairly, equitably, regardless of where you live, what you look like, or your national origin. And certainly want to make sure we are all on one team, thinking with one mind on how to address violence in Baltimore. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to address you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Harrison. We're going to be moving right along back to our original agenda, and the next speaker will be Council President-Elect Nick Mosby, coming to us from a different direction. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me on, Madam Chair. First and foremost, to my colleagues still, I'm going to absolutely miss Annapolis. I think legislatively, I grew up a lot in Annapolis, understanding and knowing how it is to get bills created and passed with such a large body, with such complicated issues. So my hat continues to go off to you guys. I know the work that you do and how much the work means to you in serving the citizens of Baltimore. What I'll say first and foremost, I'm excited. And that's really weird and strange to say in the midst of a global pandemic, when things couldn't be as tough as they were probably going into these tough times with COVID. But I say I'm excited for a number of things. One, to have an amazing mayor-elect with the energy that Brandon's going to bring in collaboration there, to have a Bill Henry as comptroller, and to have partners like you in Annapolis. I think now more than ever is the time that Baltimore can show not only our citizens in the city, but also statewide, the importance of collaboration and unification. Because I'm going to be honest with you, that's not what people expect, but that's what our citizens desperately need now more than ever. As we go after and tackle these challenging problems, these systemic problems that were always an issue in the city, but that we can dig out of. So when I talk about that excitement, that's where I'm at with it, because I know now could be an opportunity for transformative change, for us to not do things as from a business as usual perspective, but really push the ball in a different perspective and develop the things that we need to do. One of the main sentiments that I have about the importance of where we are as a city is we have to grow our city. Many people do not talk about this, and I know the likes of Madam Chair and other folks, even Senator Hayes, did a lot around the city of going after census and trying to ensure that we produce the best number as possible. But we understand and know that even that best number is not good enough for us, that we must develop the policies that's going to help grow the base of the city of Baltimore. We're a city that was established for over 1 million folks, and hopefully the census, we come in over 600,000, but many people don't even estimate that it will be there, right? So when I talk about the collaboration, I'm excited to chair a legislative body here in the city of Baltimore that will partner with the state delegations on the House as well as Senate side to really go after substantive legislation. When we talk about enabling bills, how can we proactively get ahead of things before you guys going into session, right? We know many of our colleagues throughout the state have done so, and that's what I plan on doing here. So I can't say enough about how excited I am about where we are. Now, specific things, when we talk about highway user revenue, Madam Chair, McIntosh and folks, those things that we got to look at again. I don't know if there are opportunities. I know that now is a different time because when we look at the impact of COVID on our economics, it's not just affecting Baltimore City, it's the state, right? So it'll be tougher to squeeze out certain things and to get certain initiatives passed. When we talk about Carrollton, we talk about education, the mayor-elect is exactly right. We can't afford not to provide the best education for our young folks. And then, last but not least, we have to really talk about this issue of developing economic paradigm shifts in our communities. Our communities cannot be self-sustainable if access to capital, if the redevelopment, if the growth for them from an economic perspective is not there. So, when we talk about things that are coming up, and I know Senator Washington and other folks, again, Madam Chair Smith, are going to be folks that are going to be beating the drum about this. But when we look at recreational marijuana, this is a huge opportunity. The reality is we dropped the ball when it came to medical marijuana. We dropped the ball for many different reasons, for folks that have been impacted for decades, for communities that have been destroyed by some of the laws that have been passed. And the only way that we can change it, we can continue to do criminal justice reform. We can continue to, provide additional social programming. But the only way that we can sustainably change the
30
issues
seconds.
in our communities is developing economic paradigm shifts. And I urge you, I beg each and every one of you to ensure that in that recreational marijuana policy bill, that there is ways that we drive real dollars to our communities, to those who have been left out for far too long. We have to start talking about generational wealth building. We have to start talking about the intentionality of policy that's created the communities that we fight for every single day. And in order for us to do that, we have to talk about an economic paradigm shift in our communities. I ask that you guys do that. And then lastly, please protect my baby, the sports betting bill. Please ensure that that's a diverse bill,
Time's
that that's
up.
a more inclusive bill, and that every single Marylander has access to ensure that we have that. So thank you so much. I'm gonna
Thank
absolutely
you
miss
so
you guys.
much.
Absolutely love you guys. Sorry, Madam Chair, for stealing 10 seconds.
I thought we were going to come ahead, but things happen. But I do want to lift up for folks that our Senate Chair, Cory McCray, sits on the Budget and Tax Committee, and I sit on Ways and Means and Sports Betting. We'll have to go through those two committees. So just lifting that up for the edification of the body. But moving forward with Comptroller-Elect Bill Henry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, all of you. I appreciate the delegation putting this event together. Please excuse my casual attire. Some of you may know that the time it takes to clean out an office is directly proportional to the time you've spent in it. And this has been my district office here in the 4th District for 13 years. So it's a non-trivial task to get what I'm not leaving for my successor together and prepare to bring it down to the new office in City Hall. I'm going to try to be brief. I want to hit 3 particular areas. First, in regards to the police department, I want to join with the mayor-elect, and I believe that the council president-elect has already expressed his support for repealing LIBOR or some substantial change to the existing Bill of Rights. We also need to have local control of the police department restored to Baltimore City. The mayor and city council need to have the ability to make whatever operational changes are needed, either at the request of Commissioner Harrison or at the request of the citizens we all serve. In the area of equity, the city council previously put forth a request for authorizing legislation for a real property tax credit for grocery stores in food desert retail incentive areas. As all of you know, about 25% of Baltimoreans and 30% of school-age children live in these designated food deserts, also known as grocery store incentive areas. It has been problematic trying to attract new grocery stores to many parts of the city, and it is increasingly difficult to keep some of the ones that are here. We have a very limited tax credit for personal property that is helpful for trying to attract someone who's setting one up, but it does nothing to help the grocery stores that are already here and already struggling. There's also a request for a fair rate calculation for auto insurance rates. You may or may not realize the incredible disparity between what Baltimore City residents pay for insurance and what citizens of some of the outer counties pay. And then last but not least, I wanted to make another plea for giving Baltimore City the ability to determine how we run our primary elections. 80% of the cities in this country that elect mayors have either open primaries or ranked choice voting or both. By not allowing open primaries, what we are doing is we're effectively disenfranchising tens of thousands of Baltimoreans who have chosen to either be unaffiliated or a member of a third party. I'm not saying this because I'm unhappy with the results of the recent election. I'm not saying that because I'm absolutely certain that ranked choice voting or open primaries would have changed any of the elections from this past election, but I can say with 100% certainty, Baltimore City would be a different place now if we had had either of those in the past, and that there have been elections in the past that did not go the way they should have gone in terms of how a majority of Baltimoreans really wanted to see Baltimore City's government run. So I would urge you to pass authorizing legislation to give the Baltimore City Council and the mayor the power to determine how our primary elections are held. And with that, I would be happy to yield some of my extra time back to Council President-elect so he can finish talking about sports betting.
That's very kind of you. But I believe we're going to press forward towards the mark. At this time, we'll be hearing from Madam State's Attorney, Marilyn Mosby.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Baltimore City Delegation members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present you my legislative agenda for this year. And more importantly, thank you for working with my office to continue to improve public safety and our criminal justice system in Baltimore City and across the state. As a state attorney for Baltimore City, I remain committed to working with the incoming mayor, congratulations, president of city council, the police department to ensure public safety in our city of Baltimore. Living in the heart of West Baltimore, as you guys always know, I say I don't have to, all I have to do is open up the door and see. I live in the heart of West Baltimore, the crime plaguing our communities. I've worked with 4 mayors, 5 different police commissioners, 5 different police command staff, 5 very different approaches to crime reduction in the past 5 years. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that our city needs stability within the police department. So I would echo what my colleagues have already stated, and I please allow Commissioner Harrison, who understands the need for change in the culture of the police department and who understands and knows the importance of police accountability and reform, to do his job. For the past 6 years, I don't have to go through everything that we've been through as a city, from the 163-page Department of Justice report, the uprising, the full implementation of body-worn cameras on all officers, the GTTF scandal. We have faced our fair share of challenges in the city of Baltimore, and yet we've been resilient and we've done it together. So our beloved city, our committed partners, legislators, and quite candidly, the trust. And let's just be candid, the trust of the resilient citizens of Baltimore City. We've seen our challenges in other nations, in other states across the nations in the past 6 years, yet we've exemplified resilience and stability and restraint. And that was exemplified just recently when other states across the nation, were invoking all sorts of protests, and we in Baltimore City were not. I think our criminal justice system is built on a foundation of trust between law enforcement and the communities we rely on to do our jobs, which is why in the past 6 years, my office has stood on the premise of justice over convictions, where we're committed to ensuring a fair and equitable justice system that holds violent repeat offenders accountable. You look at our stats, we had last year a 95% felony conviction rate. We've convicted every single public enemy #1 that's been designated by the Baltimore Police Department, with the exception of 2. Looking at 6 life sentences plus 700 years. We've witnessed over the past year, that one standard of justice that we apply equally and fairly, and have been at the forefront of police accountability reform in this country. And so I think in this unique sort of opportunity and in this moment in our country's history, that veil of ignorance has been lifted from Americans regarding race relations and police brutality and the need for reform. And so I'm proud of the fact of the work that my office has been at the forefront of doing. I can tell you that, whether it was in the, charging of the officers in the Freddie Gray, which was extremely controversial. I say this all the time, that accountability, which wasn't being had across this country, led to exposure. A week after we charged those officers, the Department of Justice came in, exposed the discriminatory policing practices of largest police department, one of the largest police departments in the country. That exposure ultimately led to reform. We now have a federally enforceable consent decree. You look at the use of force, de-escalation policies, the affirmative duty to intervene when fellow officers cross the line, the mandates to call a medic when requested, the body-worn cameras on all vehicles, all of which the commissioner has already highlighted. And we're already doing that in Baltimore City. So again, we're at the forefront. I think one of the things that I understand and recognize, having worked with so many of commissioners and different administrations, is that one of the things that we're going to be pushing for, and I've been very clear about, is the repeal of LEOBOR, which ties the police department's hands from getting rid of problematic officers. You cannot, and I'm going to be very candid, I need your support on this issue. You cannot underestimate the power of the local prosecutor. It is, been proposed by both state and federal legislators that we should have an independent prosecutor. What we know is that there should be independent investigations. Police should not be policing themselves, but their need for an independent prosecutor. I can tell you that since Freddie Gray, my office has convicted 23 officers. My police integrity unit is made up of prosecutors who are walled off from other prosecutors in the office. We go above and beyond in transparency. When we decline to charge officers, we've actually prosecuted and convicted 23 officers, just for the record. So we built a trust within our community, and we feel that we're best equipped to make those decisions. But it's been proposed that others make those decisions, and we really need your support. From the Baltimore City Delegation, Brian Frosch, state prosecutor who is appointed, should not be making those decisions. It should be the local prosecutor. And if you want checks and balances to ensure that other people are doing what we've been doing and at the forefront in Baltimore City, then we can include a hybrid model that would allow first right of refusal to the prosecutor, and then if we decline a charge, allowing a state elected official to come in and to make that decision. So on top of that, we have a number of other legislative items. I'm here for questions, which would include the witness intimidation, community impact statement, and of course our
just a few
budget.
seconds. Thank you so much. That was a lot of information in 5 minutes. So very appreciative of you being here with us.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to be moving from, we've had a lot of rich testimony around public safety and COVID and the economy. So we're going to be pivoting a bit to some of our next testimony coming from the education space. The next person you're going to hear from is the board chair of the Baltimore City School Commissioners Board, and that would be Linda Chinia.
Good evening, and thank you, Madam Chair Smith, and Madam and Mr. Chair McCray, and congratulations on your elected position. As you all know, we've experienced this year the most tumultuous year in education that I've ever seen. The global pandemic has seriously hampered everyone across the state to reach all students. And while virtual learning works for some students, it does not work for all. And this is why in November, we brought back small learning groups of students that need that in-person learning, such as those students receiving special education services, English language learners, and others. We have unexpectedly spent in the city schools over $131 million and counting from our budget toward this COVID crisis. And this is from a budget that was already stretched. While we hope to receive reimbursement for some, not all expenses will be covered. And based on our current projections of reimbursements, revenue, and costs, we see and anticipate a $21 million gap in the budget for the current fiscal year. The board is very concerned about funding for fiscal year 22, the blueprint for Maryland's future, and the Built to Learn Act. All of these are interrelated. Funding is driven by enrollment, and enrollment across the state, including the city, has declined during the COVID crisis. We implore the delegation to work hard for a hold harmless so that the enrollment declines experienced this year do not impact funding now or in the future. We hope to see no less funding in the upcoming fiscal year than we received in the current year, as a minimum. We also ask that the delegation work toward assuring that the maintenance of effort calculations do not take into account the unfortunate enrollment decline and reduce future funding. As you know, the current commission found that education funding in Maryland is regressive and the poorest jurisdictions receive the least. We were on a good trajectory to right this wrong with the passage of the smaller current bill in 2018, where concentration of poverty was recognized and additional funding was put in place for community schools and student health. However, when the governor vetoed the blueprint for Maryland's future, it now puts school systems like Baltimore City in a predicament of trying to find the appropriate resources to provide the needed services. We hope that the General Assembly will override the veto. We understand that there will need to be changes in the blueprint bill because of the precarious economic circumstances that we find ourselves in today. But we need to amplify the current education funding so that students can be provided the necessary resources. The blueprint bill and the Built to Learn Act were tied together. So once the blueprint bill was vetoed, Built to Learn was lost as well. And that bill, if passed, will allow city schools to continue changing the landscape of our school district. We are estimated to receive approximately $420 million for school construction under this legislation. Our CEO recommended that we earmark the funds towards high schools, and we are conducting studies now to see the full cost to renovate some of our oldest high schools. These are only a few of our main concerns this year. We also would include the issue around technology and transportation. We hope, though, that the delegation recognizes that without the current makeup of the board, we would not have closed 26 schools so that we could renovate or construct 28 school buildings under the 21st Century Building Plan. We have seen academic growth and had promising progress until the economic recession hit in 2007 and 8, and funding was again restricted. And please know that we hired one of the best CEOs in the country to lead our schools, and we are proud of the work that she is doing. So I thank you for allowing me this time and look forward to working with you during this session to bring about these needed actions for the school system.
Thank you so much. And that was a perfect segue to the next voice we'll hear from, the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, Dr. Sonja Santelises. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity and the full delegation. Never have too many congratulations, so I'm going to add mine as well to Senator McCray for his new role as the chair of the Senate delegation. I often tell my colleagues across the state how incredibly fortunate we are in Baltimore City to have a delegation that works so hard to prioritize the needs of our young people. Your partnership, your support, especially during these unprecedented times, just know that it never goes unnoticed. So I want to thank you for bringing us together tonight for this important conversation. From the very start of my tenure as CEO, I have never shied away from asking for your help, your partnership, and your advocacy in bringing the story of Baltimore's young people to the halls of Annapolis. From day one, I quickly learned the importance of these 90 days each year. And while I'm grateful for what we've accomplished together up until now, I don't think any of you will be surprised to hear me say just how much is truly riding on the decisions you will be facing come January. The remainder of my remarks this evening will focus on providing you with a brief budget update before moving into our 2021 legislative priorities. We got to hear from our board chair, Chair Chinya, some of that, and I will just expound a bit on what she has shared. So in early August, we estimated additional COVID costs of approximately $131 million based on available information at that time. The approved fiscal year 21 budget for city schools, I would note, contained no COVID-related costs. Federal, state, and local additional revenues available costs totaled approximately $77 million. After repurposing fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 funds, as well as implementing a spending and hiring freeze in the fiscal year, we believe we are on track to end the year with a balanced budget, and we will continue to closely monitor and adjust throughout the year as necessary to ensure that this occurs. We will also continue to take necessary and prudent action to balance the necessity of providing education and services to all our students with the need to ensure the long-term financial stability of the district. Technology needs and health and safety items, upgrades remain the largest cost of responding to the pandemic to date. We are confident we have the necessary PPE for staff and students, and we continue to monitor the inventory of necessary items such as masks and hand sanitizer. Upgrades to air filtration, either through installation of MERV 13 air filters or with the addition of standalone air purification units, is a key health and safety upgrade that is an example of a large unplanned expense that we have repurposed funds to be able to provide. In fact, just this morning, staff alerted me to the second wave of air filters for school buildings that is approximately $2.2 million in cost. So just as one example of the ongoing cost that the pandemic has brought to our world here in education. With regards to anticipated legislative priorities for this session, as Board Chair Chinia noted, an override of the Kerwin veto will be critical to our long-term sustainability. This was vital in district pre-COVID. All of you were instrumental in that advocacy, along with many community organizations, and it is even more imperative now. As you know,
30 seconds.
Thank you. As you may recall, SB 1030 from 2019, Bridge to Kerwin, was intended to be replaced in the long term by the policies and funding in the blueprint legislation beginning in fiscal year 22. The bridge provided specific funding and categorical programs for fiscal years 2020 and 21. While the governor is mandated to contribute $500 million to the blueprint fund in fiscal year 2022, there are no categorical mandates. Any major diversion.
Time is up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santelises. Reminder, please mute yourself if you're not speaking. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. The last citywide official that we'll be hearing from during this panel before we transition to public comment will be the CEO of Visit Baltimore, Al Hutchinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Smith and Chair McCray. Congratulations on your new leadership role and the entire delegation. I want to say thank you. Since I've been in Baltimore, this body has been very supportive of Visit Baltimore and of myself personally. As most of you all know, we generate economic benefits for the city through attracting conventions, group travelers, and leisure visitors. And in 2019, 27 million people visited this great city, left $6 billion in economic impact. Visitor spending supported 87,000 jobs here in the city, either directly or indirectly. And that represents about 6.1% of all the jobs in the city. So nearly 1 out of every 16 jobs in Baltimore is represented by a travel and tourism worker. However, 2020 happened. And this has really decimated the travel and hospitality industry here in Baltimore City, as well as around the country. And from all data points, it's being projected that the industry will not fully recover until 2023, 2024. The good news is hospitality will come back, not only nationally, but it's going to come back to Baltimore as well. But however, Baltimore City has not been immune to these challenges. In fact, Visit Baltimore's office went from a team of 65 people down to 43 people. We had to close our New York City office, selling Baltimore. We let go 42 part-timers, and we closed the visitor center, which is in the Inner Harbor. So it's been tremendously a negative impact on us locally. And our partners, both in the restaurateur community, museums and attractions community, retail community, have been very dependent on the work we do. And because of that, they have all suffered just like we have. But there's a lot of pressure on this organization to do marketing to help people fully recover from the pandemic. And Visit Baltimore believes we can play an essential role into helping these local businesses to keep their doors open. But it's going to take some needed reinvestment, not only in the industry, but also in Visit Baltimore, to make sure we can help these small businesses be sustainable. The good news, however, is that due to the credit of Mayor Young's administration and through the federal government, we did receive a $5 million grant most recently, and our marketing communications team took that investment. We could not use it for operational costs and salaries, but we had to create a new marketing story. So we created a safe travel campaign through billboards, through television commercials, print advertisements, radio, up and down I-95. And it's been up from Boston to as far south as Richmond, to as far west as Pittsburgh, really encouraging folks to come see us when they feel safe. But when they come to Baltimore, wear their mask, practice social distancing, and also abide by all the protocols that's put in place. The good news, though, is that we were able to highlight a lot of our small businesses, the Reginald Lewis Museum, Creole Soul, Double Dutch Boutique. Small businesses under normal circumstances didn't have the money to be showcased, and we were able to do this. And we put together a lot of audio behind it, and we did some voiceovers over our commercials, and the voice was no other than our own Kondwani Fidel, East Baltimore artist, speaker, who voice has helped us to really promote and sell the city. And you're going to see really soon in our Safe Travel campaign that we partnered with 40 other small minority and women-owned businesses where we gave them free ads to promote their businesses, such as National Great Blacks and Wax Museum, Ice Queens, Urban Oyster, and Keystone Corner, to just name a few. So we're trying to do our part to partner with these small businesses throughout Baltimore, not in one area of Baltimore, but the entire city. And we've taken some of this federal money, and we've also partnered to create PPE for other folks who come visit us. So we're doing work partnering now with Curry Printing in the 40th District to produce PPE kits, surgical masks, hand sanitizers, and wipes. We're also partnering with C-Lab USA, Different Regard, and Chase Street Accessories and Engraving in the 45th District, along with Jody Davis Designs and Citywide Youth Development in the 40th District. So we're providing these small businesses with some monetary revenue to keep them
30
going.
seconds.
So I'll just end with this. Our role is to continue to help people fall back in love with this charm city. We know that we're going to need your help as a delegation to help us. We think at the appropriate time, reinvestment needs to be put back into tourism as well as into Visit Baltimore. And I would say to you, investing in Visit Baltimore is an investment in the people of Baltimore. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This has been a very efficiently delivered set of information to the delegation. It's been some really great content. So we just want to thank you to the entire new incoming leadership team of Baltimore City, to the mayor-elect, Brandon Scott, to the incoming council president, Nick Mosby, and to the incoming comptroller, Bill Henry. We're just really grateful to kind of have this opportunity all in one fell swoop hear the things that we're hearing together, because we have a lot of great work to accomplish together, and not only the next session, but in the next several years. So I'm personally grateful that you took the time out of your very busy schedules to share what you could share with us today. And I would like to give opportunity for Senator McCray, chair of the Senate delegation, to also send his remarks before we next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that just on behalf of the Senate delegation, we're always inspired, and very much so inspired by those that are in our city this upcoming December, or this month, I should say, and just always inspired by Dr. Santelises, our school CEO, and the direction and the academic performance that she's pushing for our great city of Baltimore. But I think that Chair Chinia said it correct. Dr. Santelises isn't just admired just in the city of Baltimore, but just renowned across our country. And to Al, I thank you for the leadership in reference to what we're doing to make sure that our small businesses and our businesses large businesses are being impacted. But I thank you most importantly for being intentional. When you named those small businesses, when you talked about the National Great Blacks and Wax Museum, such anchors in our communities is so important. And I just want to thank you again for those opportunities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. So at this time, so that you are not inundated with my voice for several hours, we're going to give an opportunity for the newly elected second vice chair of the House delegation, Delegate Tony Bridges, will be introducing members of the public that are going to be providing public comment in their own individual capacities. Each person providing testimony will be speaking for 2 minutes. And they will also receive a 30-second grace acknowledgement by Lamar Robinson. And then he will also let you know when your 2 minutes have concluded so that you can wrap up if you're mid-thought. I just want to say thank you to the members of the public that are taking this time to come before us and share their thoughts, ideas, priorities, and things they think we should consider as we move into the next phase. So I'd like to give an opportunity for Delegate Tony Bridges to introduce himself and then introduce the next members of the public.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Chair for the Senate Delegation, McCray. Congratulations once again. Again, I'm Delegate Tony Bridges of the 41st District. Thank you again to all of the speakers that spoke before me. We really appreciate the opportunity to hear from you and what your priorities are for us as we go into Annapolis in January. But no disrespect to the people that we heard before my voice, but we want to hear from the most important people that are on this call right now. And those are the constituents, the ones that we actually work for. And so again, you'll have 2 minutes to give your statements. You'll have a 30-second sort of timer by Lamar that you'll hear him say you'll only have 30 seconds. And at the end of those 30 seconds, you'll hear from our chair once again, who will ask you to please wrap up your comments. We're going to do this like baseball. And so I'm going to have one person speak. I'm going to call 2 names. First name that I call, that person will be speaking or at bat. And the second person that I call will be on deck. And so I'm going to call those 2 names in order. And so the first person, again, will be the person that will speak, and the second person will be on deck. I'll do the next couple of minutes as we actually have a number of individuals who are signed up to speak. And so the first 2 people that I'm going to have speak are Greta Willis and Cynthia Gross. Greta Willis is going to speak first, and Cynthia Gross is up deck or is on deck, so she'll be up next. So Greta, are you with us? Greta?
I did not see a Greta. I did look. Okay. So we can always return later.
We can return to that at the end, but Cynthia Gross, I know I see you on here. Great to hear from you. You are up now, and Charlene Rock Foster is on deck.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'm going to be real quick. I usually take more than 2 minutes, but I'm not going to do that tonight. FYI, I am a lifelong resident of Baltimore City. I can afford to move. I choose not to, knock on wood. And I just want to say that because a lot of people feel like people in Baltimore City and who have been here for a long time have to be here. I choose to be here because I love this city and I am committed to it, and I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. But to what I want to speak to you about, in October of 2019, the Baltimore City Council passed legislation that will no longer allow those who enter into civil suits with Baltimore City in the case of police misconduct cases to sign non-disclosure agreements. In short, victims and others who receive civil settlements for Baltimore City will now be able to speak their truths and heal the trauma that they may have encountered. However, this law is not applicable to private entities, including private policing entities that operate within the boundaries of Baltimore City. In 2020, SB 829, the civil claim against private police, prohibition against non-disclosure provisions and settlement agreements was introduced in the Maryland Senate by Senator McCray. However, there was no companion bill in the House. The bill stalled, and from my recollection, did not make it out of committee. However, the point of the bill was to prohibit private police entities from instituting non-disclosure agreements in alleged misconduct cases. And I urge the Baltimore City delegation to take up that bill again to make policing within Baltimore City equal among all policing entities in the jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I know I am still looking on the list to see if everybody's on here. Charlene Rock Foster is up next, and then we have Jacob Harness. Is Charlene on?
We're having difficulty hearing you, Charlene. Unfortunately, we're having a hard time hearing you. Let's see if you can log back out and try to come back in, and we can try to circle back to you. Okay, thank you. Wait, actually, you sounded good there. Could you try speaking one more time? Because you sounded okay just then.
Okay.
Sounds good.
No, you may have to just, it sounds like you will have to log back out and log back in for us. All right. Jacob Harness, if you're on, you are up next. After Jacob will be Alexandria Hirsch. No Jacob? We'll go right to Alexandra.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Allie Hirsch, and I am a 9th grade Algebra 1 teacher at Mervo High School in Baltimore City. And I'm here today to echo what so many have said before me, and that is that we need to override Governor Hogan's veto of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. The override is absolutely essential for our schools, our students, our community, and our city. As a 4th-year educator, I know that the Blueprint for Maryland's Future is critical in order to ensure schools in every district in Maryland are equitably funded and resourced by providing additional support for struggling learners, broadening career and technical education programs, hiring more educators, and overall just improving the quality of all schools in the state of Maryland. The Blueprint for Maryland's Future is key to making school funding in our state equitable and sustainable. The Blueprint will meet the needs of every student, students who are falling behind, students with disabilities, and students who are English language learners will all get significantly more support to keep them on track towards college and career readiness. And supporting the needs of all students is even more important now than ever, as inequities within our education system have been magnified during the current global health pandemic. As we recover from this pandemic, it will be essential for all schools in Maryland to be equipped with wraparound services, counselors, tutors, and academic programs, and that is exactly what the Blueprint will provide our education system. The Blueprint will provide our schools with the resources and funds that are needed in order to give all of our students in Baltimore City the world-class education system that they need and deserve. In short, the Blueprint will dramatically impact the lives of each and every one of our students in the state of Maryland. The override of the veto will bring us closer to educational equity and allow each of our students to have the opportunity to be a part of the world-class education system that they deserve to be a part of. And we must work together to override the governor's veto. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments. I saw a couple of smiling faces as you were speaking, especially from our school system folks. So I'm going to go next to Shamoya Gardner and then Adina Britt. So Shamoya, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. All right, we'll get started. Good evening, members of the delegation. I'm Shamoya Gardner, proud resident of the 45th District, and very happy to see my senator and delegate leading y'all in fight for the just and equitable treatment of all Baltimoreans by this. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that your voices and actions over the next few months are going to constitute Baltimore City's effort in what this moment actually is, was the last stand from the absolute floor in terms of expectation of your actions. We know too little about the circumstances of our young people right now. There are Black and brown children in this city who have been watching their loved ones die for their entire lives. This is the same generation that was ripped from their school communities and is the same generation that is the most anxious, depressed, and suicidal on record, which is a direct reflection of where there is work yet to be done. Please keep in mind that mandated reporters, our teachers, our other educators no longer have the same ability to lay eyes on our children and ensure that they are safe and okay. There are thousands that we have not heard from right now, and it should be top priority to find out where they are, if they are well, and what can be done to support them. Beyond that is, of course, education generally. Please demand the results of the feasibility study that MSDE was supposed to undertake to assess their ability to implement the blueprint with fidelity. It was supposed to be done last year by a group to be chaired by the superintendent of education, and that just never happened. The state board and the superintendent have abdicated their responsibility to school communities across the state during this pandemic, forcing our school system and many others to balance the best interests of students, staff, and their families against constantly shifting goalposts of whatever the administration deems a good education in the moment. So I'm also asking that you all explicitly hold MSDE and the state board to account in a public forum for their lack of genuine engagement and meaningful guidance in the midst of this chaotic time. Thank you all so much. I look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you as well for your comments, Jamoya. We are going to go to Adina Britt, and then we're going to come back to Charlene Rock Foster. I know you're on as well. So Adina first, and then Charlene Rock Foster.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. My wish list are support and passage for the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021 that the Senate has put forth. All 15 pieces of legislation are integral to the proper level of police reform required to get the state policing on a proper path. The act includes police reforms that address accountability to ensure that no agency can pass the buck at addressing misconduct issues. It includes loosening the grip of secrecy within the Maryland Public Information Act and abolishes the overreaching LEABOR. LEABOR needs to be repealed, not tweaked. Returning local control of Baltimore City Police Department to Baltimore City to ensure city constituents have year-long access needs to be repealed to the controlling entity as opposed to relying on an entire state's worth of legislators during a limited amount of time per year. And the BCPD falling under state control has been a major roadblock to reforms and oversight. Fiscal concerns that were brought forth prior by city senators is moot since $16.1 million was paid out for GTTF cases between October and November of this year alone. Backing a new iteration of Delegate Grammer's bill, which will be, it will have a new number, but it was HB 1395, persistent area.
30 seconds.
I'd like it for it to proceed at a judiciary committee and just, be brought forth for discussion and potentially a vote. I agree with Comptroller Henry on ranked choice voting and alternative voting methods, and to that would do away with first past the post voting and to be determined by the city council. And that's all I got right now.
No, that was a lot, and we definitely appreciate your comments for today. We are going to go back to Charlene Rock Foster, if you are on here and available to speak. Charlene? No, you're on here. You're still having problems, it seems. If that's the case, we'll come back to you. Is Keisha Goodwin available? No Keisha Goodwin. What about Gaston Goba?
Yes.
Keisha?
Yes.
All right, you're on.
Okay. Good evening, delegation. My message today is about dissonance and redlining in Baltimore City Public Schools. Although our district is underfunded, the way that the funds are distributed cripples our traditional schools even more. Examples of educational redlining: not adhering to the More Learning, Less Testing Act, creating a two-tier system. When schools loses its charter, a consequence is being funded as a traditional school and regulated as a traditional school. For the last 3 years, the budget has been approved in the spring, and then 10 months later, a different budget that increased charter schools per pupil funding has been finalized for the same academic year. Charter schools has a network that is consulted on nearly every aspect of school-related matters, but there is no advisory group for traditional schools. And this is the one that really takes the cake with me. When our Baltimore City Public School CEO wrote to Kerwin against the funding formula because it may impact charter schools. And this was after she cut traditional schools by nearly 25%, while in the same year holding charter schools homeless for overfunding them. Now, I want to talk about data manipulation. Here's a scenario.
30 seconds.
If we're talking about a 7th grade student population with a sped teacher of 7 students in her homeroom and 5 core teachers of 31 students or 30 students, and a resource or specialist teacher with no homeroom students, instead of the portfolio showing that there is about 30 students in each class, what the district will do is divide the 157 students by 7, thus presenting class sizes as 22 per 43 students in a homeroom or as a class size. This is manipulative, and it isn't the experience of the students, staff, and parents. I'm asking for your support to help us hold the school system accountable.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Keisha. I am going to try to go back to Charlene Rock Foster one more time. I want to give you an opportunity. I know that you're on here again, so you want to give it a try again? Keep speaking.
I'm sorry.
It's still breaking up a little.
Please know that you can submit written testimony if you're having difficulties. We still want to hear from you, and everyone in the delegation will receive this. So I just wanted you to know, Charlene, do not give up your ability to try with us.
Thank you. So again, Charlene, if you could submit that in a written testimony, we'd appreciate it. We'll all receive that as well. Is Jacob Harness on? Jacob, you would be up next.
That's me.
All right, Jacob, you can go.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jacob. As said, I just wanted to, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Just keep a little anecdote. I'm a teacher in Baltimore City, and I just got done teaching 30 minutes ago. And now that I'm done teaching, I'm here. After this, I have to go submit a plan that I forgot to submit earlier this week because I didn't have any planning time to do so. Out of 5 days a week, I probably get 1 planning period to myself. And that is an hour of time that I spend right now, especially calling parents and reaching out and making sure that that personal, important contact is happening. And this really leads me to tell you guys why, of many reasons, Kerwin is so important. It is the effort that it puts into giving more planning time to teachers. So as I'm sitting here, I'm just now realizing I haven't even eaten yet, but what's on my mind is work. So as you guys start to look through this legislation and really hopefully work towards an override, I really would challenge you to reach out to your constituents who are teachers to get their personal testimony, because there are so many aspects of this bill that are so important to teachers, and that's just one of them. But I want to say thank you for giving your time and just really, really push the Kerwin Commission, the blueprint for Maryland success, and everything that work has entailed so far. So happy holidays. Thanks for listening. That's all.
Thank you, Jacob. We definitely appreciate your testimony as well. Do we have Gasson Goba available? If we don't have Gasson Goba, we will move on to Blanca Gasca. I'm sorry if I'm getting your name wrong. Blanca Gasca, and then to Doris Lopez. Blanca? You gotta unmute yourself.
We are here, but we need a translate. So we are waiting for Gabby Roque. I don't know if she's here.
Yo soy Dori López, pero va a haber un intérprete.
Okay, are you able to? Doris, are you helping?
Is Gabrielle here now?
I'm here.
Gabby, you're here to assist, correct?
Yes, I am here to translate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for allowing the accommodation. Adelante. So I'll just go ahead and tell Veronica and Blanca they can start. Ya pueden empezar.
Okay. Hola, buenas noches. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad de poder compartir mi experiencia.
She says, "Good evening, Chairwoman Smith, Chairman McCray, and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my experience.
Mi nombre es Verónica Gasca y mi hermana es Blanca Gasca. Las dos somos madres.
My name is Veronica Gasca. My sister is Blanca Gasca. We are both mothers.
Yo tengo dos niñas y Blanca tiene 3 niños.
I have 2 girls and Blanca has 3 children.
Y tenemos un pequeño negocio familiar en Baltimore que se llama Gasca Fiesta Renta.
And we have a little family business in Baltimore called Gasca Party Rentals.
Mi hermana y yo siempre hemos tenido que apoyarnos una a la otra desde que llegamos a este país hace 15 años.
My sister and I have always had to support each other since we arrived in the country 15 years ago.
Verónica y yo teníamos 11 y 13 años cuando venimos a este país para reunirnos con nuestro padre.
Veronica and I were only 11 and 13 when we came to this country to reunite with our father.
Pero el día que llegamos al aeropuerto nos avisaron que nuestro padre había sido detenido.
Unfortunately, the day we arrived at the airport, we were told that our father was detained by immigration on his way to work.
Mi hermana y yo nos quedamos a cargo de nuestros hermanos menores de 7 y 9 años.
My sister and I were left alone and with the burden of also taking care of our younger siblings who were 7 and 9 years old.
Para cuidarlos tuvimos que sacrificar la oportunidad de estudiar.
To take care of them, we sacrificed the opportunity to study.
Y logramos encontrar un trabajo haciéndonos pasar por personas mayores.
And we managed to find work pretending to be older than we were.
Por no saber el idioma y nuestros derechos, vivimos con miedo de llamar a la policía por ayuda.
Not knowing the language and not knowing about our rights, we lived in fear of calling the police for help.
Y un día nos quedamos sin hogar.
And one day we found ourselves homeless.
Eso fue muy difícil para nosotros, pero no imposible.
It was a really difficult time, but nothing is impossible.
Ahora mi hermana y yo, gracias a casa, hemos aprendido más de nuestros derechos.
Now my sister and I, thanks to Casa, have learned more about our rights.
Y cómo luchar para nuestra comunidad.
And how to fight for our community.
Y por eso estamos presentes porque hemos vivido como las detenciones impactan a las familias y pedimos que ustedes
And that is why we're here today, because we have experienced how detentions impact families, and we ask that you pass the Dignity Not Detention Act.
y pedimos que ustedes pasen la propuesta de dignidad y no detención para que las familias puedan permanecer unidas.
So that families can stay together.
También es importante reconocer
It's also really important to recognize
que muchos inmigrantes recién llegados no confían en la policía.
that many newly arrived immigrants do not trust the police.
Que se pase el acta de confianza para que Maryland pueda ser un estado santuario.
30 seconds.
That is why we also urge you to pass the Trust Act so that Maryland can become a sanctuary state.
Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Blanca, and thank you, Gabriella, for the translation as well. We gave them all a little bit of time just for everyone to know. We gave them a little bit of time because we had to, adapt for the translation. And so, thank you all for your testimony today. Definitely appreciate it.
Muchas gracias por su testimonio.
Thank you. Up next, we will have if Gasson on? If not, I wanted to give him another opportunity, him or her another opportunity. If not, we'll move on to Doris Lopez, followed by Patrice Pilgrim. if Patrice is on. So Doris Lopez, the floor is yours.
Doris, ¿estás allí?
Sí, estoy.
Adelante.
Muy buenas noches, mi nombre es Doris López, soy originaria de Honduras.
Good evening. My name is Doris Lopez, and I am originally from Honduras.
Mi familia y yo venimos a este país por falta de oportunidades en el nuestro. Tengo un año viviendo en la ciudad de Baltimore.
My family and I came here a year ago to Baltimore because we didn't have many opportunities in our home country.
Actualmente somos miembros activos de Casa en Acción. Hemos participado en muchas actividades.
We are really proud to be active members with CASA and to support our community.
Apoyando así tanto a la ciudad como a nuestra comunidad en proceso electoral.
Supporting our community as well as the larger Baltimore community.
Así como también en lo que es educación en la escuela.
We've supported in education and the electoral work.
Repartición de alimentos en la ciudad cuando fue la explosión en la calle de Labyrinth.
I've been really active in supporting our school through the food distribution, as well as when there was an explosion not too far on Labyrinth Road from where I live.
Y así estamos siempre impulsando para que haya un Baltimore mejor.
And like that, we are always fighting for Baltimore to be better.
Así también actualmente con las necesidades que vive nuestro país, estamos enviando cajas con ropa y zapatos para ayudar a muchas familias.
At the same time, we're thankful for the opportunity we have here to be able to support our families that we leave behind.
Es por eso, ¿verdad?, que estoy aquí actualmente, pues en mi condición estoy dispuesta a luchar y por eso estoy en esta reunión testificando.
And that's why I'm here tonight in this meeting to testify.
Y espero el apoyo de los delegados. Necesitamos que aprueben una ley para que Maryland sea una ciudad santuario.
And I'm asking tonight for your support of the Maryland Trust Act.
Ya que las personas migrantes no podemos andar libremente por miedo a ser deportadas.
Until we have the passage of the Maryland Trust Act, our immigrant communities cannot truly live without fear.
Y es por eso, ¿verdad? Todos los días yo a mi esposo siempre le digo, tengo temor a que él no regrese y que de repente me llame que ha sido deportado.
I tell my husband every time he leaves for work that my greatest fear is he won't come home.
Y es por eso que pedimos su apoyo, ¿verdad? Y aprueben esta ley y así también podemos construir juntos un Baltimore y una ciudad mejor para todos.
And that's why I ask for your support again, so that together we can continue to support this wonderful city we now call our home.
Muchas gracias por el espacio y buenas noches.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and have a great night.
Thank you as well, Doris, for your testimony and for your help on the Labyrinth Avenue explosion here in the 41st District. And thank you, Gabriella. I don't know if you want to relay that back to her.
Gracias, Doris, por todo lo que has hecho para la ciudad y también apoyando cerca de la explosión de Labyrinth. And it's a pleasure to be able to do so. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Es un honor para mí.
She says it's an honor for her as well.
All right, and so we'll continue to move on. I know we still have a number of individuals who would like to speak. Is Patrice Pilgrim on? If I don't see Patrice, we're going to move on to Stephen Hanley. No Stephen. The next two people that we have are Craig Collins-Young and Joshua Harris. I know I saw Craig and Joshua on here. So Craig, you're up first.
Hey, thanks. Kudos to Bill. I'm glad to hear him promote ranked choice voting. I'm a resident in District 13. And I too am here to request that during its 2021 session, the Maryland General Assembly pass enabling legislation that would allow Baltimore City or any other jurisdiction to adopt ranked choice voting. In my case, I believe it should be enacted without a top two primary. But ranked choice voting is something I believe in because it promotes winners needing a majority vote. It minimizes that sort of strategic voting that I'm sure we've all had to do, and it discourages negative campaigning. I believe that this city needs more voices to be heard, and that democracy is actually strongest when more voices are heard. So I'll keep it quick. I'm asking the General Assembly to listen to the voices of Baltimore City residents and pass this legislation so that the city can enact ranked choice voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. We appreciate your testimony. Josh Harris. Josh, you're up next. Josh, you're breaking up. I'll give you an opportunity to try to correct your sound. You may have to log off and log back in again. But while you're doing that, the next two people we'll go to are Bridget DeMai and Susan Clark. So Bridget, I know I see you on here. Bridget, if you want to go next.
Thank you so much, members of the Baltimore City Delegation. Can you hear me okay? And my name is Bridget DeMai. I'm a resident of Baltimore City in District 40, and I'm here to testify in strong support of the Medical Debt Protection Act. This act would ban hospitals from suing low-income patients for unpaid medical bills, prevents wage garnishment and liens from being placed on houses and cars over medical debt, and requires hospitals to implement a debt repayment plan that does not exceed 5% of the patient's monthly income. And I'm an advocate for affordable healthcare as well as a union member. So I want to remind everyone that we're in the midst of the worst pandemic of our lifetimes. So it's more important than ever before that people seek healthcare when they're feeling ill so we can slow the spread of this virus. Fear of being sued for medical debt adds an additional barrier to healthcare access that prevents people from seeking the care they need. That means fighting the pandemic will be that much more difficult. And of course, this is a moral imperative, but it's also a workers' rights issue that we stop predatory medical debt lawsuits. Between 2009 and 2018, nearly $60 million in wages have been garnished from Maryland workers over medical debt, including hospitals garnishing the wages of their very own workers. Johns Hopkins Hospital is the top offender for suing its own employees for outstanding medical bills. Between 2009 and 2018, again, Hopkins got 461 total wage garnishment orders over a medium debt of $1,371. Now, that amount of money is a drop in the bucket for a wealthy institution that receives generous tax breaks to provide healthcare for low-income residents. However, to a working family, $1,371 can determine whether the family can stay housed, fed, and afford their basic necessities. And it also adds further insult to injury for an institution to pay its workers under $15 an hour, provide scarce healthcare benefits, and then turn around and garnish the wages of those workers. Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope that you will make the Medical Debt Protection Act a top priority this session.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. You got a lot in those 2 minutes. And so we will now go to Susan Clark before we try Josh again. So Susan, if you're on, you're up now.
Good evening, members of the Baltimore City Delegation. My name is Susan Clark. I've lived in Baltimore my entire life, and I've been a GNA for 30 years. I'm a member of 1199 SEIU. My fellow union members and I are healthcare workers on the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis in long-term care facilities and hospitals. We need to pass the Maryland Essential Workers, excuse me, we need to pass the Maryland Essential Workers Protection Act to keep me and my co-workers and all essential workers as safe as possible during COVID-19 and any future pandemics. Being on the front line of the crisis means we are the ones who do hands-on work with patients, and dozens of our 1199 members of Baltimore City are known to be infected with COVID-19 due to the nature of our work. Every work day, I wake up get dressed, kiss my family, and go to work, not knowing if today would be the day I could be infected by COVID-19 by a patient or an asymptomatic coworker and bring the virus back home, putting my loved ones in danger. It's scary not knowing who may expose you to the disease. And I worry about my family's health daily. We need to have the right to high quality PPE and safe work conditions while we're working really hard to control this disease. It was very chaotic.
30 seconds.
The PPE at the beginning of COVID-19, and many of our union members are still not getting the PPE they need to this day. We also really need free coronavirus testing. If testing is mandatory, it needs to be free, especially because most frontline healthcare workers are still making less than $15 an hour. Quality PPE and free testing will make sure we can have the safe and hygienic workplace we deserve. In my 30 years as a GNA, I've helped treat all types of illness, and I have never
Your
seen
time is up.
illness as severe as COVID-19. We can't afford to wait another day for protection. I ask the members of this delegation to honor healthcare workers' sacrifices by making the Maryland Essential Workers Protection Act your top priority this session.
Thank you, Susan. Definitely appreciate your testimony. I'm going to try and go back. I know we missed a couple of names. We want to make sure that we get the general public in to ensure that they have an opportunity. So it's Joshua Harris. Are you back on yet? Joshua, you're in here. Try to speak for us.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Gotcha. Go for it.
All right. Reason I'd like to address here. The blueprint for Maryland's future now. Number two is towards a elected school. Fully informed or oriented. This is a good white self-confidence and democratic power to the representatives or does not see this veto. It's critical that we override fund our there was clear, explicit, yes, and not only who are in front of our classroom, you know, in the classroom, kids of Black institutions. 30 seconds. Yes.
Thank you, Joshua. Definitely appreciate your testimony. It was still a little choppy there, but I think we were able to get everything in and understand what you were trying to say. So definitely appreciate it. I am going to give a last call for any of the constituents that I mentioned before who have not had an opportunity to speak just yet. There were a number of individuals who we missed. There were actually 4 individuals that we missed. Greta Willis, Gaston Goba, Patrice Pilgrim, and Stephen Hanley.
I believe Earl, we might have missed Earl.
Earl Young? Earl, are you on?
I believe Charlene called in, by the way.
Yes, we heard from Charlie. Earl? If we don't have Earl, then that concludes our testimony from the general public and the constituents that we serve. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Bridges, for doing such a capable job and relieving people from the sound of my voice for a bit. So thank you so much. We're going to now move to the next phase of public testimony that will come from those representing organizations, community groups, and nonprofits. We will have opportunity for maybe a break if it gets too crazy, but you folks are doing so awesome. I'm inclined to keep moving. Everyone will have 2 minutes, the same as the overall public, due to the just overwhelming response. We want to make sure there's enough people to hear this great testimony live. So we will begin with Elizabeth Haffey.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair and Chair McCray and members of the delegation. My name is Elizabeth Haffey, and I'm the Assistant Director for Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Medicine. On behalf of Johns Hopkins, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about our legislative priorities for the upcoming session. We remain committed to working with you on these key priorities. Telehealth. We ask for your support of the Preserve Telehealth Access Act, which will permanently expand telehealth reimbursement that has been permitted during the public health emergency. Telehealth has enabled greater access to healthcare because of these flexibilities, and we ask for your support. The pandemic has unfortunately further illuminated the health disparities and inequities that have persisted for generations. Our priority is to work with the Maryland General Assembly to advance legislation that will begin to tackle some of these disparities. Budget. We ask for your continued support of Johns Hopkins initiatives and those programs in which we are a partner. I've listed a number of these programs that are really vital to our operations in my written testimony. We ask for your continued support. Expanding liability protections to our healthcare providers is of utmost importance to the institution. We ask for your support of the Healthcare Heroes Act in partnership with the Maryland Hospital Association and other member hospitals. We remain committed and concerned about public safety. And through the JHU Innovation Fund for Community Safety, we have committed $6 million to be dispersed over 4 years to support initiatives and programs that aim to reduce violence in the near term. And finally, in my written testimony, I've highlighted some of the work that we've done in the community and across the city and across the state to address these significant challenges, from food distribution, mass distribution, mobile testing. And as always, feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to working with you this session.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I apologize for the mispronunciation of your last name, Haffey. So I want to make sure I acknowledge people's names should be said correctly. I want to move on to the next witness, or the person providing testimony would be Dr. Anthony Jenkins.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair? Thank you. Well, first of all, let me say good evening to everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you. Madam Chairwoman Smith and the member of the Baltimore City Delegation, I want to thank you for this opportunity to come before you to speak. On behalf of Hopkins State University, I want to extend our sincere appreciation for the ongoing support that we have received from the Baltimore City Delegation over the years. This support illustrates the value of State University and recognizes our importance as an anchor institution in the city. There are 2 points that I will hit on tonight that I will ask you into consideration as we move into the upcoming legislative assembly. First and foremost, with regards to the university's COVID-19 response, the university has engaged measures to meet all federal, state, and local guidelines, and making sure that we kept our campus safe, our students, our faculty, and our staff. It goes without saying that the virus has had a significant impact on financial status of the university. In fact, in fiscal year 21, the university sustained an appropriation reduction of just about 2.5 million.
30 seconds.
Which is approximately 7.1% of our overall budget. The university relies heavily on its state operating appropriations to meet the educational needs as well as the economic needs of our community. And I want to also stress the importance that, we understand the financial strain that the state is under and the impact that the pandemic has had across the state of Maryland. But with that, however,
time is up.
Dr. Jenkins, please conclude your final thought there.
Okay. I would just ask that as we move into this upcoming session, if we could keep in mind the need for additional support from the state to the institution. I ask that have an appreciation for any budget cuts.
Thank you, sir. We're going to have to wrap that up. I appreciate that. We heard the money. Got to be thinking about it. We're going to be thinking about it. Thank you so much. We want to respect the time. Moving to the next speaker, that'll be Ms. Diamante Brown.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting me, Delegate Smith. So the BTU agrees with many of the issues that the district and other public school advocates are prioritizing this legislative session. As longstanding partners in fighting for fair funding, we absolutely need veto overrides for the blueprint legislation and for the Built to Learn Act, as well as formula fixes, hold harmless protections, payment for our students to use MTA, and so on. And of course, we need legislation to close the digital divide. High quality internet access is a Baltimore issue, not just a rural issue in the state of Maryland. These are crucial funding issues and should be the central focus of your work this session. Without these programs, our students, families, staff, and the entire city of Baltimore will suffer. We also encourage you to pass legislation to increase mold inspections in our schools and for the acceptable amount of lead in our schools' water supply to be reduced to 5 parts per billion, down from 20 parts per billion. Every year we deal with mold hazards in our classrooms. And while most of our schools now have their fountains off, we know that in some of our schools where the fountains are still on, they have levels of lead above 20 parts per billion, as we can see in the reports issued by the Maryland Department of the Environment. We need to protect our students and staff and lower this limit. Of the 24 Maryland County School Boards, 19 are fully elected, 4 are a hybrid of appointed and elected positions, with Baltimore City standing alone as the only completely unelected school board in the state. We believe this glaring difference is a vestige of white supremacy that says self-governance and democratic structures that empower citizens to choose their own representatives is a right that Black Baltimore can't be trusted with. BTU urges the city delegation to support Mayor-elect Brandon Scott's belief in a hybrid board with the majority of the seats being elected. I know it's my time. Give me 20 seconds. We are working in
20 seconds. I need you to wrap it up really quickly. Not 20 seconds, really quickly. Sorry.
We are working in a coalition with a variety of community leaders and groups to draft legislation that would enact this structure starting in 2022, as well as ensuring that school board campaigns are eligible for public financing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We understand it's a short time, but we have so many more people and we're appreciative of your time. The next speaker will be Lydia Walther Rodriguez.
Hi, good evening, delegation, and special gratitude and thank you so much to Chairwoman Smith and Chairman McCray. Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you so much. My name is Lydia Walker Rodriguez. I'm the region director with CASA here in Baltimore. And I am, delighted to be here tonight. And I'm grateful for our directly impacted community members who also testified this evening. You've heard some of their stories tonight. And our 3 members who testified tonight make up over 100,000 active members that we have throughout the state of Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Majority of our members residing in Maryland. And we know that this COVID pandemic has had a direct effect to our immigrant community members. And we have seen how this federal government has completely forgotten about our immigrant community. And we're hoping that the delegation and the state of Maryland does not forget about our immigrant community and ensure that there is true immigrant justice legislation that is passed at the state level to ensure that our community members don't continue to feel neglected, but continue to be in fear while the duration of this pandemic continues. I want to particularly lift up 2 immigrant justice legislations in addition to a police reform legislation affecting so many of our members. The first legislation I want to uplift is the Trust Act and the importance for all of the immigrant community members as they're navigating this pandemic, that they can trust that state agencies will not be collaborating with ICE, and they can trust that they can continue to go to the hospitals, they can continue to
30 seconds.
their students to school. In addition, I want to uplift the Maryland Driver Privacy Act to ensure that the MVA is not sharing information with ICE, as well as I want to uplift local control of Baltimore City. It's an intersection between the immigrant justice movement and police reform that our members are very passionate, and we hope that the delegation considers all 3 of these legislations.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, Brian Sun.
Thank you, Delegate Smith, and thank you all for being here this evening. I'm going to be really brief. I'm calling in support of some of the initiatives around addressing disparities and some of the follow-up work around the task force on racial reconciliation and equity, and also the health and all policies task force. As a member of that task force in particular, I think that it's important that we recognize the efforts and the impacts that the COVID pandemic has had on our community, and many of those issues which stem from generations of inequity and a lack of attention to those. And looking at some of the various priorities through the legislature, I just ask that you all continue to draw that through line between economic justice, education, healthcare, criminal justice, and environment, and the impacts that those have on our health. And the most valuable thing that we have, and that's our time here on Earth, here in Baltimore City. We know that the life expectancy gap of up to 20 years amongst our communities is not only an injustice, but it's a tragedy. And I think that this pandemic has helped to expose some of that. And so I ask that we definitely focus on those issues and support those efforts. I'm in support of that. And one other thing that I want to draw attention to, Representative Clyburn from South Carolina has said that he would like to see the Biden administration address the root causes of some of the systemic injustices, particularly impacting the Black community and other minority communities around the country. I ask that we look
30
at those.
seconds.
Yep, I ask that we look at ways that we can undo those unintended consequences of bad policy and legislation over the years. And that is the only way that we can really move forward and not just put Band-Aids on fixes, but really solve them from a root cause perspective. And so, again, in support of the work around racial equity and health and all policies. And I think that, I'll leave my comments here. Thank you all for your time.
Mr. Sims, did you ever identify the organization you're affiliated with?
The organization I'm speaking on behalf of tonight is the Greater Baltimore Health Improvement Initiative. It is a Baltimore.
Okay, that's all. I just want to get that for the record. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Delegate Smith. Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right,
the next person to speak will be Mac Dawson. Are they perhaps joining us by phone and I cannot tell? Is there a Mac Dawson? Okay, I'll return to that name later. Tiara Hawks, I believe I've seen Tiara. It's your time.
Good evening, Chair and members of the delegation. My name is Tiara Hawks. I'm the chairwoman of the Baltimore City Civilian Review Board, which is the only entity in Baltimore City that is charged and statutorily created to investigate citizen complaints and issuing disciplinary recommendations against officers for complaints of excessive force, abusive language, harassment, false arrest, and false imprisonment. I'm speaking to you today about the LEOBR and the MPIA. The LEOBR prevents the CRB from conducting an investigation that leads to discipline. This means the CRB's investigations and recommendations are nothing more than recommendations, and that discipline is still entirely reliant upon the often compromised investigation of the police department, which renders the CRB virtually toothless to hold police officers accountable. The MPIA prevents disclosure of disciplinary files, which makes the administration of the CRB unwieldy and often unworkable. We often make our recommendations knowing nothing about previous incidents or previous disciplinary actions taken against them. Recently, the CRB was asked to sign confidentiality agreements, which undermines public confidence in the CRB's work. Generally, the CRB was established to give communities greater oversight in policing, but that role is hampered by the MPIA and the LEOBR. More importantly, the logistical challenges posed by the MPIA and the LEOBR, the lack of transparency and accountability undermines communities' faith in the CRB's ability to seek and get justice for victims of police abuse, which raises important questions about
30 seconds.
CRB and the weight that we hold in Baltimore City. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to working with the delegation in the future. We have our CRB meetings on Wednesday, the third Thursday of every month. Thank you.
You're on mute, Chairwoman.
My apologies. This is not worthwhile if I'm not on sound. I just wanted to let Tiara know that please give us any, flyers or social media collateral about those meetings so that we can, use the delegation social media to spread the word. So thank you. Anyone else, feel free to do the same. The next speaker will be Abby Cock.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Abby. And we're the co-founders of a grassroots advocacy organization called Baltimore for Border Justice. We're here to call upon you to fight for the Dignity Not Detention Act to end for-profit immigration prisons, the Trust Act to end Maryland cooperation with ICE, the Persistent Aerial Surveillance Act to stop warrantless spying from the skies, and for the entirety of the crucial measures in the Maryland Police Accountability Act. But most of all, we are here to demand the end of state control of the Baltimore Police Department. From our highest local officials to the most grassroots of activists, Baltimore is demanding the same rights to self-determination that all other jurisdictions have. And yet you continue to hoard power over our police unto yourselves. Why? We cannot become by law a sanctuary city or implement other department-wide policies. We cannot effectively implement community oversight. We cannot consider tying misconduct costs to pensions. We cannot even go to our own local elected officials to seek redress. Local control is not sufficient for change, but it is necessary. State control of BPD has perpetuated a toxic void of responsibility in which the police kill, maim, terrorize, and defraud residents with impunity. It has to end, and you have to end it.
As a trans woman, I've witnessed and experienced firsthand a pattern of abuse within our police force, which can go unseen by gender-conforming people. Every situation I have faced, the police have not done their job to respond to violence against me or other trans women. Instead, they have treated us as a joke and often assume we are
30
sex
seconds.
workers. Most importantly, they don't follow up. They seem to pick and choose who's worthy of service. And when I go to my city council person to complain, I'm told they are a state agency and there's not a lot the city council can do about it. This is unacceptable. The residents of our city deserve to have a process that'll work for them and a police force that is part of their community. Instead, we have an agency that is out of reach for our local residents. We demand accountability. The police have created a system of fear that keeps us all in the dark and afraid to even report the violence we face. Never once have I found the police in the
Time
city
is up.
to do anything to support anyone in a meaningful way and mostly just place people in more danger.
Thank you for that testimony. I apologize. I did not. I wasn't able to note the name of the second speaker. But Abby, if you would like to send that to us later, we'd be happy to have it just for on the record. But I'm thanking you both for your testimony. The next speaker would be Samantha Blau.
My name is Samantha Blau. I'm a volunteer with Jews United for Justice, where I serve as the co-chair of the Justice System Reform Committee. I'm a resident of the Patterson Place neighborhood in District 46. Jews United for Justice organizes nearly 6,000 Jewish Marylanders and allies in support of local and statewide campaigns for social, racial, and economic justice. In Baltimore City alone, we number 1,200 strong. We appreciate that our city's delegation in Annapolis has convened this meeting and invited constituents and groups to share their input as we prepare for the General Assembly in January. The work of Baltimore City's delegation is vital since there are so many important issues that the state legislature will take up that will especially impact Baltimore City's residents. I'd like to share with you our 5 legislative priority areas that we hope you will advance this session. The first is overturning Governor Hogan's veto of the women's pre-release facility legislation. Last session, the General Assembly agreed that Maryland's women deserved a program dedicated toward helping them make their strongest possible transition from incarceration back into their families and communities. As many of these women will be transitioning back to our communities, we hope that we can count on your support for this veto override. Our second priority is police accountability. JUFJ has joined more than 85 other Maryland organizations to form the Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability to call for 5 specific impact reforms. The first is repeal of LEOBR. The second is restoring local control of BPD. The third is making investigations into police misconduct transparent through reform of MPIA. And the fourth is removing law enforcement from our schools. And fifth is limiting the use of force by law enforcement statewide. I'm just going to skip to some of our other priorities. Renters' rights priorities. We hope that we can reform the rent court process, provide right to counsel, reduction of harms, of fees, court records, and consumer reports, and immigrant rights. Everything that Casa already brought up. We appreciate the leadership of many within this delegation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next person will be Iman Freeman.
Good evening, everyone. Let me turn on my camera. Hold on 1 second. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Iman Freeman. I'm the Executive Director of Baltimore Action Legal Team, and we're the project manager for the People's Commission to Decriminalize Maryland. The People's Commission represents over 20 organizations that are made up of and led by members of the community who advocate for or have experienced negative encounters with the state's justice system. As Maryland's legislature convenes this January, a number of bills will be introduced to reform the criminal justice system. Many bills, as currently drafted, focus on the important issue of police reform, which has received much deserved attention in recent months. But a critical issue of police reform is rarely addressed, and that is reducing the number of police encounters with the public in the first place. It is the hope of the People's Commission that our legislatures will also recognize that it's time that we expand the concept and scope of police reform. If no initial contact is made with an officer, then there can be no abuse. The People's Commission is a new coalition whose goal is to reduce the disparate impact of the justice system on people who have been historically targeted and marginalized by laws based on their race, gender, disability, and socioeconomic status. We are examining Maryland's laws to understand the ways in which they reinforce structural racism and inequality. We've just presented our initial findings and testimony before Senator Mary Washington's task force to study crime classifications and penalties. Decriminalizing poverty would look like changing and eliminating the laws that create first cycle of poverty by inflicting criminal legal sanctions, including incarceration and excessive fees on individuals because of their inability to pay for court-ordered experiences. I'm just going to stick to go to the end. As Maryland grapples with calls to divest from law enforcement, a critical point we must address if we are to make substantial change is whether or not a person has an initial contact with a police officer. The People's Commission believes that it's time we have decriminalized all of Maryland and stem the flow of police abuse by limiting the amount and types of ways the public are asked to interact with the justice system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Freeman. Now we'll be hearing from Joe Francaviglia.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Smith. Chair McCray, let me add my congratulations.
Is Joe freezing for others? Okay.
Yes.
We revisit that. I just want to do another attempt because we did have one outstanding party from the citizens panel. I believe it was Charlene that is attempting to call in as an alternative. Charlene, are you with us? Okay. Well, it looks like Charlene's not on the phone, but Joe is trying to get back into the room. So let's see if Joe is now in a better situation. Joe, can you hear us? Yeah, you're moving. Very good. I think you're ready to go. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds great.
Sorry, it reloaded an hour and a half in, so sorry about that. So just want to say first, thank you, Chair Smith, Chair McCray, just adding my congratulations along with everyone else and the entire Baltimore City delegation. Appreciate you holding this important hearing. So I'm Joe Francavilla, Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland, and I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what Mayor-elect Scott said, or Council President-elect Mosby, Board Chair, the CEO, as well as many teachers and others. So I just want to give you the framework of how Strong Schools Maryland.
Is this delay happening for others as well? It's ironic, and a few folks who will be hearing from Andrew Coy, not yet, but might be an apt opportunity for you to weigh in on what we're facing here. Is Pia Morrison available? I believe I saw Pia.
I'm here.
Okay, great.
Okay.
You're ready.
Okay, good evening, members of the Baltimore City Delegation. My name is Pia Morrison, president of SEIU Local 500, the fastest growing union in our area, and I'm here to speak about the Community College Bill. Thousands of Maryland residents turn to local community colleges as an affordable and effective way to start a career, learn a new trade, and to begin a better life. Our community colleges are anchor institutions in many of our local communities, offering employment, education, and a path to economic empowerment. Sadly, for many students, faculty, and staff, the employees at all but one of Maryland's community colleges lack the right to collectively bargain with their administration. This means that in virtually all decision-making, the professionals who are on the ground at local campuses and working directly with students have no voice. As many educators will tell you, their working conditions are their students' learning conditions. Their lack of a voice has had serious consequences for students, including loss of office hours and access to their instructors outside of class time. As Maryland looks to recover from COVID, our community colleges will play a central role. Community colleges will provide instruction to a generation of young Marylanders and professional retraining for workers who need a fresh start in the new economy. For so many Maryland workers, our community colleges will be the lifeline they need to recover. To guarantee that our community colleges provide the structure, atmosphere, and instruction that working Marylanders will need in a COVID recovery, it is essential that the educators and staff who work with them day in and day out have a voice at the table.
30 seconds.
No administration has firsthand knowledge or expertise that faculty and staff will bring to bear in decision-making. I'm asking you today to join us and commit to passing legislation that would grant the right to collectively bargain to community college faculty and staff, and to do so with the veto-proof majority. Faculty and staff need to have a voice to ensure that conditions at our community colleges can be as fruitful as possible for student learning and for economic recovery. Thank you so much for your kind consideration.
Thank you so much. And I think I should do a service much in the traditions established by Delegate Bridges to at least forecast who's coming after that next person. It's not a lot to give you in terms of what's happening in the near future, but there's 25 plus more people who need to talk, so I think I'll do you that courtesy. The next person will be Christopher Stevenson, and then next on deck would be Andrew Coy.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Baltimore City Delegation. My name is Christopher Stevenson, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst with 1199 SEIU, the largest healthcare union in the nation, where we also represent 5,000 workers in Baltimore City alone. I come here today to ask this delegation to support essential workers all across the state of Maryland by making the Maryland Essential Workers Protections Act a priority. Unfortunately, we are experiencing the worst pandemic in modern history, and a little to not enough has been done to ensure that our frontline workers are safe. But when we look at our economy, we have to realize that essential workers are the primary reason we are able to persist throughout this pandemic. Essential workers are our healthcare workers, our first responders, our mail delivery workforce, and our agricultural workers who keep food on our tables. Without them and this opportunity to ensure that their safety at work, we can never say that we did what we could to protect all essential workers. For this very reason, our legislation provides the right to safe and hygienic working conditions to ensure that workers are provided PPE and sanitation procedures to keep them safe. It extends hazard pay and healthcare enrollment to provide the assistance workers need during pandemics to take care of themselves and their families. We contend that an emergency action plan is needed in order to provide all employees and employers with certain standards and procedures for all to follow during this and any other pandemic. The unfortunate truth is that many have died in Maryland due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's why universal pandemic and bereavement leave is needed. Equally as important, this legislation provides the right to refuse dangerous work under certain conditions
30
and
seconds.
criteria. And last but certainly not least, access to free testing is critical for our frontline workers to decrease the number of further contaminations. What you hear before you today should never be matters of consideration, but a matter of public need to protect this city and this state. 1199 SEIU respectfully asks this body to support the Maryland Central Workers Protection Act. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I want to give Joe another chance. He looks like he's moving, and if he can just get it out.
All right, so let's give it one more shot. Chair Smith, thumbs up. Can you hear me? Hey, so before I speak on behalf of Strong Schools Maryland, let me add my voice to the call for municipal broadband. And now back to Strong Schools Maryland. So Joe Frankeville, Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland. I'm just going to give you the framework of how we're thinking about this session, not to reiterate what everyone before said that we need to override the blueprint. So we're thinking about it as the 3 C's. The first C is complete the override. The second is the companion legislation. And on this, we need to resist any urge to scale back or water down. We know that there's going to be adjustments of timelines. We need to, tweak some things here and there. We need to make sure we're prioritizing students who have been most impacted by the pandemic with services. But we need to resist wholesale opening it up for every and any amendment that will go along with it that could impact the integrity of the legislation. And then the final C is COVID. We are going to add our voice to support for the measures that will help students that have been impacted by COVID, as well as school districts. And we really want to highlight the declining enrollment issues. And we stand ready to back you up and back everyone up who's ready to fight for this, because we know that we would love gubernatorial leadership, but we'll see what happens. And should gubernatorial leadership not come on this, we hope that the General Assembly steps in and acts to make sure we hold districts harmless. And so to respond to the chair's call for resources, I will drop in the chat. I know everyone, or hopefully everyone on this call, has expressed support for the override of the veto of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. But talking to colleagues,
30 seconds.
Thank you. Talking to colleagues in other parts of the state, they might need to hear from folks other than you all, other than some other folks. So I'm going to drop in the chat resources that you can use that are coalition members from all across the state that they might listen to first, as well as their constituents. And I can promise you we'll be following up with additional resources as session comes. So you have what you need to both help your constituents, but also talk to those around the state. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate the fight. We are on the finish line. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and bearing with us. Our next testimony will be coming from Andrew Coy, not a minute too soon, and he'll be followed by Gabriella Carl.
Yes, thank you, Delegate Smith and the whole delegation. And as you heard, obviously, municipal broadband and internet access is essential. I'm the Executive Director of the Digital Harbor Foundation, and I also serve as the team lead for the internet access team of the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition. I'm here speaking to advocate that internet should be treated more like a utility, as it has become that, and it's no longer a luxury good that is available to those who can afford it, but needs to be something that we understand more about, and that we have policies in place to support everyone getting online in this critical time. You'll hear more about the Digital Equity Coalition, I'm sure, for some others from the coalition that will be speaking, but let me just focus my attention here on this question of internet connectivity and the need to make a commitment. This legislative cycle, I know there's legislation that has been put forward by members here, including Delegate Brooke, Delegate Learman, for the Digital Connectivity Act, and I would encourage folks to support this as a critical way to put Maryland in line with other states. There are 33 other states that have similar offices that are statewide offices to coordinate and support this work. Additionally, I do feel like it's important to put forward the idea of a report card in which performance data from internet service providers is provided at the community statistical area to help understand the impact that this is having. I would also encourage us to create a formula by which internet speeds are calculated so that, similar to inflation, we can constantly know that internet speeds need to increase over time as technology use continues. So I encourage you to support these efforts and advocate for digital equity across the entire state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next will be Gabriella Carl, and then after Gabriella, we'll be hearing next from Donald Fry.
Hi, my name is Gabriella Carl, and I'm here as a...
Just Gabriella, there's some feedback. I want to ensure that everyone's on mute. If you're not speaking, please put yourself on mute. Do you have another thing nearby plugged into this session as well, Gabriella? That may be the source of the feedback. Okay. Right now. So give you your chance. There you go.
My name is Gabriella Carl, and I'm here as a resident of District 46 and as a clinical faculty member on behalf of the Maryland Carey Law Immigration Clinic. Many thanks to this delegation for hearing my testimony in support of a bill that, if passed, would ensure equal access to the law for all Maryland residents, regardless of their immigration status, by eliminating the unintended immigration consequences of probation before judgment for non-citizens. The bill, formerly SB 653 HB 217, is once again being sponsored by Senator Lee and Delegate Juanica Fisher, and Senate President Bill Ferguson is our co-sponsor, and we're so grateful for his support. Probation before judgment, or the PBJ, was designed as an alternative to a conviction. It is a benefit offered to worthy defendants with the hope that they will meet all the requirements of probation, be rehabilitated, and not reoffend. For most Maryland residents, the system works, and the PBJ is not a conviction. For Maryland residents who are non-U.S. citizens, on the other hand, a PBJ plea can have catastrophic consequences. Under federal immigration law, a Maryland PBJ qualifies as a conviction or an admission of guilt that can trigger deportation. This bill adds an alternative process to Maryland's PBJ statute so that the courts can find facts justifying a finding of guilt without requiring an admission of guilt from defendants. This 10-word addition is consistent with how our lawmakers and courts intended probation before judgment to operate, as an opportunity to take responsibility for one's mistakes without suffering lifelong consequences. This bill made it through the Senate last year, and we think, but for COVID-19, would have made it through the House as well. We had many productive conversations with our opposition, the MSAA,
30 seconds.
And they did not object to the language of the amendment by the end of those discussions. We think this bill is an opportunity for the General Assembly to show Marylanders that they are committed to rectifying the racial injustices and inequities that plague the criminal justice system by amending the PBJ statute so that it offers the same benefits to Maryland residents who are non-citizens as it currently does to Maryland residents who are citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that testimony. Just make sure everyone's on mute. Thank you. The next person we'll be hearing from is Don Fry, and then after Don Fry, Liz Simon Higgs.
Mr. Smith and Chair McCray and members of the Baltimore City Delegation, Don Fry, President and CEO of the Greater Baltimore Committee, and thank you for this opportunity to present this evening. The GBC is in its final stages of developing its priorities for the upcoming session, but there are several key items that we know we'll be advocating for and or monitoring very closely. First, you've heard about as a support for override vetoes of the education and public safety bills that were vetoed by the governor following the 2020 session. We also will be strongly working toward police reform legislation, particularly as it relates to efforts to increase racial equity and social justice. Our Public Safety Committee has had presentations from both committees in the House and the Senate about this upcoming legislation. Like all, we've been concerned about the impact that COVID has had on business, so we'll be working on policy, funding, and regulatory solutions that accelerate economic recovery with an emphasis on support for small and minority-owned businesses. Some of the specific issues that we're looking at are things dealing with liability protection for employers who adhere to CDC, state, local guidelines about reopening, efforts to ensure that recovery resources are directed to most impacted industries, restaurants, hotels, tourism, retail, things of that nature. Programs and policies or funding that increase access to capital, particularly again for small and minority-owned businesses, both traditional and non-capital sources.
30 seconds.
Efforts to address child care challenges through targeted policy or funding innovations. Also efforts to address the digital divide for students, families, job trainees, and workers at all levels. Additionally, we're going to monitor and support legislative proposals, protect critical transportation funding for Greater Baltimore, and efforts to enhance workforce development as outlined in our recent report called Preparing for the Future. There's a number of policy examples that we'll be laying out, which I'll be glad to share with you moving forward. And again, we appreciate the opportunity to present to you. Look forward to working with you, the entire delegation, on issues that you find important for citizens and
Time is
businesses
up.
in Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the testimony. Liz Simon Higgs will be up next, followed by Earl Young from the original panel who had some technical difficulties, and we're glad he's back with us.
Hi, good evening. I'm Liz Simon Higgs, and I organize with Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice. We organize white people as part of a multiracial majority for justice, and I hope many of us witnessed the beautiful actions this summer. We work in partnership with individuals and organizations who are directly impacted by racial justice issues, including the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs here. And I live and organize in the 46th district. I hope we all share the goal of increasing or establishing trust between the police and the communities that they serve. Trust is a two-way street. There has to be investment from the citizens, there has to be investment from the police. Right now, city residents invest around $600 million a year in the BPD. That's more than a quarter of the city's operating budget. But if we want to have any impact on police policy or general operations, we have to go through the state, the General Assembly, because the department, as has been mentioned previously, is an instrumentality of the state. This is at best inefficient. It's also unfair. The other jurisdictions in Maryland have the power to pass local legislation to affect their police forces. But more than being inefficient, state control isn't working. It's actually lethal. You've seen the news coverage about corruption. And in fact, the more the city funds the BPD, the more homicides there are per year. And this is just a really rudimentary graph showing the city's allocations each year and the homicides basically rising the more money we invest. That doesn't make sense. This is the deadly impact of white supremacy. We want to restore local legislative control. And we appreciate the many delegates and senators who have supported this in the past, and we hope you'll make this a priority this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. I locked my children out of my room, so you have my sympathies. This is what we're doing in 2020. So next we'll be hearing from Earl Young, who was a part of our original panel. He will be giving testimony in his own individual capacity, and then we'll jump back into organizational representatives with Jonathan Smeaton after that. Thank you, Earl. You're on.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman and delegation. I greatly appreciate this opportunity. Unlike many on the panel tonight, I am a returning citizen. I spent 34 years and 7 months incarcerated. My sentence was commuted by Governor Hogan. So it comes with difficulty, great difficulty for me to express the need for the governor to be removed from the parole process. It is extremely difficult for somebody to grant me my freedom after working so hard for so long. The parole process has 10 qualified individuals who become familiar with the individuals throughout their incarceration, through the many parole hearings. For the governor, not just the current governor, but previous governors, to ignore the hard work, the sincere effort that individuals have put into their rehabilitation. I encourage the panel in this legislative session to greatly consider removing the governor from the process.
30 seconds.
As a returning citizen, I work in Baltimore public schools as a mentor. I work in Baltimore City Police in their reentry program. Of all the individuals who talk about the remarkable things that I do or am doing, it's numerous individuals who deserve a second chance, and they can't get it because of a process. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We do not get the opportunity to hear these types of voices as often as maybe we should in Annapolis. So that's why I'm thankful for the opportunity for us all to be together here today. So thank you so much for that. Next will be Jonathan Smeaton, and then next on deck will be Dr. Kalila Harris.
Hello, my name is John Smeaton. I'm a District 43 resident and a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice Baltimore, or SURJ. SURJ Baltimore organizes white people as part of a multiracial coalition for racial justice, including Maryland's Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability. We interact with thousands of people in Baltimore through our events organizing and mailing list. I asked the members of Baltimore City's delegation to repeal entirely the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, or LEOBR, and to ensure any privileges given exclusively to police officers by Maryland's LEOBR cannot manifest themselves in union contracts or local laws following this repeal. Maryland's LEOBR is a slew of provisions that give extrajudicial rights to police officers in internal investigations of citizens' complaints. LEOBR protects bad police officers against the safety of civilians, especially Black and brown civilians, who are abused, brutalized, and murdered by them. When accused in a formal complaint, an officer is given the names of everyone investigating and interrogating them. Then officers are given 5 days before any interrogation can occur. For what reason does an officer need this time beyond manipulating those involved to sweep the complaint under the rug? After 5 days of getting their story straight with their named investigating and interrogating officers, officers are interrogated. For accused officers, typical interrogation tactics used by police on civilians are thrown out the window. These interviews happen at a reasonable hour for a reasonable period, with questions asked by only one officer per interview session. Worst of all, once the investigation is complete, officers are judged by the most sympathetic and biased jury possible, a panel of either mostly or exclusively police officers. These are not privileges given to anyone else accused of murder or
30 seconds.
Some might say we should revise LEOBR so that we do not throw out the baby with the bathwater. This ignores the fact that the original Bill of Rights was made to give protections to the powerless against the powerful. Police officers are not the powerless. The powerless cannot break backs with rough rides, kneel on necks, strangle throats in broad daylight, break into houses and shoot before asking questions, and ignore the pleas of mothers not to kill their sons. LEOBR is an affront to rule of law and the thousands of lives lost to police brutality every year. So please repeal LEOBR now, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Dr. Kalila Harris, and then next on deck will be Eric Smith.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I'm Kalila Harris. I am a 26-year Baltimore City resident. I have 3 beautiful Baltimore babies. I'm an alum of the Morgan State University. I am an alum of the Carey School of Law. I'm also a senior non-resident fellow with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, as well as the Social Action and Connection Chair for the Sci-Fi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I want to respectfully recognize that while I live in the 43rd Legislative District, that my home is located on the unceded, unsurrendered land of the Lenape and Susquehannock Nation. I would like to talk with you today about how critical it is for the Baltimore delegation of the Maryland legislature to take decisive action in support of community control over Baltimore City public school system, to overturn the vetoes of Governor Larry Hogan for passage of the current commission legislation, passage of deeply needed restorative funding for Maryland's historically Black colleges and universities, and passage of pre-release care specifically for Maryland's women leaving correctional facilities. Further, our delegation must prioritize closing the gap in financial support for working people who have faced financial ruin and eviction in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. As it relates to community control of schools, in recent history, oversight by the Board of School Commissioners has been at the hands of people appointed through processes that lack transparency or widespread input from the general public. The community demands at a minimum a hybrid board wherein at least 51% is represented by elected members of the community. Those elected should be held through public financing only, be held only during the general election so any eligible voter can participate in the final selection. and afford financial compensation so no member of the community
Time
is
is up.
prohibited from participation based on their economic status. Thank you for your time. I've submitted my remarks in writing, and I look forward to your action on behalf of Baltimore City residents.
Thank you very much. I want to just double check in case there's someone that called in. Is Eric Smith with us by phone by chance? Okay, I do not hear Eric. Next on deck would actually be Corey Johnson, followed by Megan Collins. Corey? Unmute Corey.
Can you hear me now? Good evening. It is an honor to speak with the delegation this evening. My name is Corey Johnson, and I'm the Senior Policy Research Analyst at the Job Opportunities Task Force. For those not familiar with our organization, JOTF advocates for legislative and budget proposals to improve the educational and employment opportunities for Maryland's low-skill, low-income workers. Needless to say, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has consequently exacerbated many of the systemic issues plaguing our workforce. During the upcoming legislative session, JOTF will support the following public policy initiatives that promote access and eliminate barriers to education, training, and job opportunities for low-income workers. First, we seek to override the governor's vetoes on the following initiatives. First is unit rule repeal, repealing the unit rule which blocks access to expungement and presents significant barriers to employment, transit, housing, and other benefits. As well as 2 women's pre-release centers, which would establish a pre-release center for incarcerated women, as there are 9 for men and none for women. This would allow for the successful reintegration back into society. As for our policy initiatives, we would love your support on our following bills. 1, we would like to expand access to diminution credits, which rewards incarcerated citizens for acquiring their GED, college degree, or vocational training certification. 2, in Maryland, even if a person is not found guilty of a charge, it remains on the public record, which presents various stigmatized barriers. Our bill would allow for the automatic expungement of charges that did not result in guilty verdict. 3, currently those placed on home detention electronic monitoring are forced to pay hundreds of dollars. Our bill would reform the pretrial system by requiring indigency determinations. We are also seeking to eliminate credit history as a factor for auto insurance companies. And we would also like to expand the Maryland Working Healthy Families Act. We do hope that you all will support our legislative efforts as we try to increase economic opportunities for returning citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll be hearing from Megan Collins, and next up on deck would be Adam Eckelman. Megan?
Good evening. My name is Megan Collins, and I'm a staff attorney with Disability Rights Maryland. I'm here tonight to support making the override of the blueprint a top priority. This sweeping legislation, if enacted, would completely change the nature of public education in Maryland for years to come by addressing funding inequity, mandating expanded preschool services, requiring behavioral health services with a recognition of the need for trauma-informed care, addressing teacher training issues, and creating an accountability structure that was missing from previous efforts to overhaul the state's education funding structure. We appreciate the blueprint's recognition that in order to stay on track for college and career readiness, a world-class educational system would require additional supports and services for students with disabilities. Many students with disabilities also belong to families who are low income and families where English is not the primary language, also groups identified as requiring additional resources. We strongly support the expansion of public preschool slots to include children with disabilities, regardless of family income, and the inclusion of students with disabilities as a structural element of preschool program quality. When children with disabilities have the opportunity to attend school with their peers without disabilities from the earliest age, all children benefit. Given the importance of intervening early to address developmental delays and disabilities, it is important to provide funding for the Infants and Toddlers program, which has been funded since fiscal year 2009. It is also important to ensure funding for students with disabilities in state-funded education programs, such as those within the juvenile services facilities. Importantly, the blueprint addresses teacher preparation. So many of the issues faced by the families represented or served by Disability Rights Maryland are the result of school staff who do not have sufficient training to meet the needs of children with disabilities in their classrooms. The need for this important legislation has only become clearer following the closure of physical school buildings and switch to virtual learning in the spring of 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the educational inequity in our public schools and need for reform. It is imperative that our schools have the funding they need to provide individual attention to students, including students with disabilities, pre-kindergarten students, and students from backgrounds of poverty, to ensure that every school community is treated fairly and equitably, and to maintain sufficient staff to meet students' special education and mental health.
Time is up.
The Kerwin Commission recommendations and Maryland's future are in the hands of the General Assembly and Governor. Our children can't wait any longer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Adam Ackelman, and then on deck will be Claudia Wilson-Randall. Oh, Adam, I hear you. You're on mute. I think Adam is having a moment. I think he's having some challenges. We'll get back to Adam. Is Claudia Wilson-Randall available?
I can start. I can jump right in. And isn't this, this is exactly what we're talking about with digital equity. Isn't this point drilled home even that much more on this hearing? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me, the Baltimore City Delegation. Today, my name is Claudia Wilson-Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. The network envisions a state in which all neighborhoods are thriving and where people of all incomes have abundant opportunities for themselves and their families. I would just urge the Baltimore City Delegation to work during the session towards an equitable recovery in the state of Maryland. Specifically, we hope that we work collaboratively to prevent residential and commercial evictions and foreclosures throughout the state, as well as expanding adequate housing options for people experiencing homelessness and are at great risk for exposure to the virus. It's also critical that you address digital equity in response to this crisis and beyond. Seema Iyer had to jump off, but what she said in the chat is just, I can't emphasize enough, which is we will never be an equal and just city if we don't eliminate digital disparities in every neighborhood. And it's just critical that we address this and push this to the top of the state's priority list. I also think that it's critical that we provide funding for nonprofits to see that they provide needed services across the state. And I also want to just say that digital access and literacy is a lifeline for education, workforce development, health, and now the court and justice system. So it's really critical that we drive that point home. Adam?
Thank you so much for your testimony. Oh, okay, you want to jump in, Claudia? I'm picking with you. That's great. Move us along. Next, we'll hear from Adam. Oh, he's moving. Good sign. We have
I'm finally moving.
That's
the
great.
irony.
And the next person that will be on deck is Amalia Deloney.
More than a third of Baltimore households cannot access this hearing. And that's because, as you guys can tell, and as is an essential issue in the city, the distribution of internet, computers, and digital skills has disproportionately favored wealthy and white households, and it's left poor, Black, Latinx, and Native homes disconnected from the digital world and digital skills for all. The state of Maryland has an opportunity right now to become a national leader for digital equity. I serve as the executive director for Libraries Without Borders, where we break down barriers that prevent low-income families from accessing technology and training. And I am one of the co-leaders of the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition, which means I know that digital equity is not just an end in itself, but it's part of our everyday lives. It's the ability to attend this hearing. It's the ability to have a telehealth appointment with your doctor, to hold a job, to apply for unemployment benefits. We recognize that we need digital equity for a more just and prosperous future. There are a number of different policy needs that we are advocating for. As a coalition, we represent more than 60 different organizations. You've heard from so many different folks, and you will hear from more today. But there are a number of asks I want to reiterate. One is for the creation of a digital equity caucus at the state level, where we can really create a long-term plan at the state level so that cities, counties, and everyone in this great state can have equitable access to internet, to computers, and to digital skills. You'll also hear about the importance of having net neutrality principles at a state level. This is a model that California has done. You'll also hear about the fact that more than a third of low-wage workers lack basic digital skills. This is a huge issue. And you'll also hear, and I want to reiterate, the importance of supporting gap networks, that is grassroots internet service providers, as well as the importance of accountability and a report card. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Amalia Deloney, and then next on deck would be Megan Butler.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Baltimore City Delegation. My name is Amalia Deloney, and I work at the Robert W. Deutsch Foundation. We're also a proud member of the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition. Nationally, people of color account for nearly half the population who lack any form of home internet access. Sadly, it's true in Baltimore as well, where more than 40% of our households lack home broadband, the vast majority Black and Latinx. For these families, the contrast between the power of the internet and the depth of the digital divide is profound. Income inequality, biased credit scoring, and other forms of systemic racial discrimination are just some of the barriers they face as they are denied the power of broadband to apply for jobs, pursue educational opportunities, participate in civic life, and organize for social change. For communities of color, it cannot be understated, digital equity is about more than access to devices and strong internet connections. It's a leveler of society, and it's a precursor to racial and economic justice. As such, we make the following 5 requests. Adopt open internet principles, modeled after the California net neutrality law. Acknowledge the relationship between broadband and redlining and the structural inequities that persist when internet service providers choose to upgrade high-profit neighborhoods first. Make broadband access a racial equity priority, emphasizing adoption and build out for those who have the least access and ability to pay, fostering economic opportunity and mobility. Create a racial equity impact report for all internet service providers operating within the city of Baltimore using public rights of way. And finally, leverage public ownership in service of a long-term vision of public, free, universal internet access using city-owned infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Megan Butler, and next on deck would be Gary Bonner.
Thanks, Chairwoman. I'm Megan Butler, and I work for Fearless, which is a digital services firm in Baltimore. Our mission at Fearless is to build software with a soul, which means that we seek to create a world where good software powers things that matter. Fearless is proud to join other local organizations as part of the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition, or BDEC. In particular, we've been involved with BDEC's devices team, whose goal is specifically to help ensure that there are affordable, available, and sufficient devices for all Baltimore residents. We are grateful to have a voice here tonight, but we would be remiss not to point out exactly how crucial access is in being able to use our voice here. Having your voice heard should not just be a privilege for some, but a right for all. And of course, digital inequity goes beyond not being able to participate in government meetings. It affects everyday life from school to work to healthcare, etc. Digital inequity also hurts companies like Fearless that call Baltimore and Maryland home. We are 125 strong and growing, and we pride ourselves on hiring a talented, empathetic, and diverse workforce. But this can be especially difficult in Baltimore City, where the pool of qualified talent is limited and not representative of the diversity in our city. Bright Baltimoreans are hampered by a variety of issues, but some are solvable. Addressing digital inequity matters to us because we want to help develop the next generation of talented tech workers in Baltimore, but this is not possible without digital access. The work being done by BDEC is incredibly important, and equity needs to go beyond organizations coming together in the worst of circumstances. Handing out devices during a pandemic so children can attend virtual school is obviously vital in the short term. But if we are honest, it is just a Band-Aid on a very deep cut that needs more attention to close and heal. In partnership with BDEC, we respectfully request that policies are created and funds provided to ensure that there are devices available for all residents. It's vital to our city and state's well-being to ensure that we push digital equity issues forward this legislative session. We know this isn't a small problem, but we look forward to helping both with BDEC and with the delegation. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for that testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Gary Bonner, and on deck will be Denise Riley. Gary?
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And by the way, those kids you scurried out of the room, they have found their way to all the sugary snacks, and you're not going to get any sleep tonight because they're going to eat all that stuff while you're on here. The ability of Baltimore City residents, by the way, I'm executive director of PCs for People, Maryland. We are a nonprofit social enterprise committed to removing the digital divide issue here in Baltimore and around the country. The ability of Baltimore City residents to become economically mobile is vital to the city's efforts to retain and grow our tax base and reduce violent crime, as well as do things like strengthen our schools and neighborhoods. So as you consider priorities for the coming year and beyond, we encourage you to partner with business community, social enterprise like us, and stakeholders in the community to craft a comprehensive strategy to foster economic mobility for Baltimore's most financially strapped families. At PCs for People, Maryland, we refer to these financially strapped families as emerging families. These citizens are working to pull themselves forward out of poverty and will lean forward into new opportunities to drive their success as those opportunities become available. Access to good, reliable computers and high-speed internet is often well beyond the financial reach of more than 75,000 of our most vulnerable households in Baltimore, as documented by recent Able Foundation.
30 seconds.
How do we solve this? Here are the three things that my organization is asking you to consider. One, make access to good computers and high-speed internet a centerpiece of your efforts to help economic mobility in Baltimore. Two, require all city and state agencies to make computers and related devices they retire available for donation to nonprofit social enterprise refurbishers who are committed to repairing, updating, and making those computers and devices available to low-income people.
Quickly say the third.
Third one, require a third-party independent monitor to keep score and understand how this process impacts people's ability to find employment, get increased earnings, maintain student engagement, and long-term reduction of reliance on government safety programs. I can't hear you.
I'm up here waxing poetic on mute. You know, I have not properly hydrated over the several hours, so I apologize. But again, thank you for that testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Denise Riley, and on deck will be Gail Sunderman.
Good evening, Chair Smith and members of the delegation. I'm Denise Riley, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs for the American Federation of Teachers in Maryland. On behalf of our President, Marietta English, and our more than 20,000 educators and public sector members across the state, we ask your support on legislation that will restore the collective bargaining rights of faculty at the Baltimore City Community College. You have our written testimony, so I'll be brief. AFT Maryland has continued to represent the faculty at the community college even after they were stripped of their collective bargaining rights. They have asked AFT Maryland to submit legislation to reinstate that right. Collective bargaining rights have been restored to non-faculty staff at the community college, and they are represented by AFSCME. The faculty at the community college also do not have tenure, a protection available to all professors in the Maryland state and public institutes of higher learning. The lack of collective bargaining rights and tenure makes the highly educated professors at Baltimore City Community College at-will employees. It also denies them protections for academic freedom. As you all know, academic freedom is imperative for professors to teach, speak, publish, and do research to advance knowledge for the good of students and for all of society. We want to thank Chair Smith for sponsoring the legislation that is important to the faculty members as well as the students in Baltimore City enrolled
30
in the
seconds.
community college. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise, for that testimony. Just a moment. The next person we'll be hearing from is Gail Sunderman. Gail?
Yes, hello, Madam Chair, members of the delegation. Thank you for holding this hearing. My name is Gail Sunderman, and I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Baltimore City. Last year, we lobbied hard, along with many other groups and individuals, to pass the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. This year, we're here to urge you to override the governor's vetoes. It's also critical to adopt companion or correction legislation that will be needed to adjust the funding phase-in and implementation timelines. We think this legislation should ensure that funding levels are maintained and not delayed. This includes accounting for the increases that would have been begun in fiscal year 2022. And we also think that the companion legislation should prioritize funding for those who are already behind or are underfunded. A couple of the programs that we think we want to ensure the implementation and funding timelines are maintained are for community schools, the expansion of early education and transitional supplemental instruction. We don't think these should be delayed, that they are very important and benefit all the children in Baltimore City. The other issue is the revenue bills that were passed to fund the blueprint. These were also vetoes, and this needs to be addressed. And I'd also like to draw your attention to Senate Bill 1030, which was passed in 2019. We want to ensure that the 22 budget allocates these resources that are already encumbered. So I'm sure you know how important this veto override is. We are here to support you and make sure that we make this happen in the upcoming session. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for that testimony. I want to just double back to make sure someone wasn't missed. Is Eric Smith with us as a caller by chance? Okay, I guess Eric wasn't able to stay on the entire time. The next would be Eleni Bax, followed by Michael Scott.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Thank you.
There's an echo. Maybe if you're in two things, can you get out of, if you're in two different, or if you have Facebook in the background?
I don't. Do you mind coming back to me and I'll try to sort it out?
No, you sound good. I think I just manually muted some folks. You sound good now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. My name is Eleni Baxt. I'm an attorney with the Capital Area Immigrants' Rights Coalition. I'm speaking to ask for your support on LR 1478, the Universal Representation Bill. I provide free legal representation to residents of Baltimore City, particularly District 46, and residents of other Maryland counties who are detained in immigrant detention centers. Our clients come from a wide range of backgrounds, but they are all confused and scared and face months or years in detention and possible deportation, many to countries where they fear for their lives. They've been torn from their families and communities, which on average they have been part of for about 12 years. Their only chance of remaining in safety and with their families is by navigating one of the most complex legal systems. Despite this complexity, immigrants are not guaranteed an attorney unless they can afford to pay for one. Only about 30% of detained immigrants have counsel. This has life-altering consequences. Detained immigrants face even greater challenges due to loss of liberty and free movement. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated these inequities. These challenges, along with the dire consequences resulting from removal, are why universal representation projects, merits-blind representation models with no eligibility criteria other than income and lack of private counsel, are so desperately needed. Manuel was one of my clients represented through our Baltimore City Universal Representation Project, which aims to ensure that all residents have access to a legal process that is dignified, meaningful, and offers them the best chance possible at success. Manuel lived in Baltimore City with his 2 young children, 9 and 4 years old. He fled Honduras after his family suffered severe gang violence. Fortunately, he won asylum and returned home to his 2 young kids. Since universal representation projects see so many cases, they are perfectly situated to identify and create systemic change. We have advocated for judges to consider ability to pay in bond hearings. We challenged this in court with a Baltimore City resident and Care Coalition client as plaintiff. And as a result, Maryland bond hearings have been altered to allow for greater due process. While universal representation does not guarantee outcomes, it provides members of our communities with due process and dignity. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much, Eleni, for that testimony. What we're going to do is hear Michael Scott next, and then Eric Smith, because I do have confirmation that he is here with us. So, Michael.
Congratulations all, it's a new day. I'm Michael P. Scott of Equity Matters. We're a cross-sector of innovators. As a network of equity practitioners, we believe in communities of practice that support cultures where evolutionary development of equitable practices is the norm. We've been promoting equity in all policy and been doing so for years, ever since our report documenting a 29.6-year life expectancy gap, not 20, was entered into the congressional record by Rep. Elijah Cummings and Senator Cardin. I'm also part of the Equitable Alchemy Benefit Companies, currently raising an integrated capital fund, along with Collectively as part of a national cohort of cutting-edge capital to do charitable loan funds and mobilizing resources for social impact by reducing costs of capital to underinvested entrepreneurs, particularly around acquisitions and profitable business conversions to employee ownerships. There are 3 things I want to talk to you about quickly. Bills I urge you to support, information that needs further hearings and further explorations, and activation of private investment in saving lives and treasure that actually align with both social equity and smart financial equity practices. The bills, anything around equity in all policy, health in all policy, we urge you to support. I most urgently rise for CJSA campaign for justice, safety, and jobs around local control and repeal of LEOBOR. We'd be remiss not to mention the Dignity Not to Detention Act, the Trust Act, the veto override, the home harmless or digital divide. We also urge you to look into special education funding and data during the pandemic. The things that all these bills have in common is old racist tropes of
30 seconds.
that conversation around where Black Baltimore is ready or worthy or not to have basic self-determination. You need hearings on information on early warning police misconduct technology, do away with the aerial surveillance. And if we're not tracking it, we're not serious about it. How much do we spend defending officers? Well, I can tell you in the last 2 weeks, it was $10 million alone in the payouts. So we need a way to track that better and data-driven policy around sense-making. Finally, if we do all this, we can align and activate private investment in these unprecedented economic times, but we cannot have social impact bonds if we do not track the cost first. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, for your testimony. We will now hear from Eric Smith, who we were unable to hear a bit earlier. And then after Eric, next on deck will be Peter. I don't know if it's a silent K, Jome. I don't know if I'm in the ballpark. I apologize in advance, and I look forward to being educated about the proper pronunciation of your name. Next, Eric Smith.
Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'll say October 1st was a good day for fathers. Fatherhood fairness to be exact, because on October 1st, the bill was passed that went into effect, giving fathers greater access to their children for joint custody purposes. Now it's time to act again as far as going to court and having the judges not be against fathers. Okay, with joint custody, so it's right for fathers to have is for joint custody. It's something that needs to happen now. The chief judge in charge in Baltimore City doesn't always give fathers that I'll say bearing to present his case, and now a lot of judges and magistrates are doing the same. We just ask that the Judicial Committee and the Judicial Proceedings Committee look at fatherhood fairness once more during this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you for your patience as we were trying to make sure that we got you up here. So thank you for your diligence. At this time, we'll be hearing from Peter, followed by Brian Prechtel.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to speak with you tonight. My name is Peter Chomi, and as a resident of Baltimore City and president of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to highlight important legislation passed by the General Assembly during the 2020 legislative session. With your leadership and support, the BSO has made tremendous progress. Our elected leaders in Baltimore City have consistently provided vital support and advocacy when it matters the most, and we are very grateful. The passage last year of House Bill 1658, introduced by Delegate Maggie McIntosh, and Senate Bill 1065, introduced by Senator Nancy King, were vital to supporting the continued success of the BSO, including our concerts and educational programs that enrich the lives of people in Baltimore City and Maryland. As we continue to serve our community during this devastating pandemic, we're here tonight asking for your support to override the governor's veto of the important legislation that was passed by the General Assembly. House Bill 1658 was part of a 2-year effort, including the legislatively created work group on the BSO in 2019. With the leadership of Senate President Bill Ferguson and House Speaker Adrian Jones, the work group, chaired by former Senator Ed Casemar, helped us to develop a roadmap to putting the BSO on a path of stability and excellence. In conclusion, we seek your support to override the governor's veto of House Bill 1658 and Senate Bill 1065. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Brian Prechtel, and then next on deck would be Malcolm Heflin.
Thank you for having me. I am a percussionist in the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra and chair of the Players Committee. I want to echo what Peter Chomi just requested and just outline a couple of things that I think were important to note. You know, I think that the intersection of the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement has given us an opportunity to think about what kind of an organization we want to be and what kind of an organization we should be for Baltimore. And one of the things we're going to be doing is, and already are doing, is trying to re-examine what we put on the stage and who comes into our audiences. I think that the support that this bill will give us the chance to enact our strategic plan and to get out of the Meyerhoff and into other places around the city and the state, and to let everybody experience the greatness that is the Baltimore Symphony, and really allow this organization to bring culture everywhere in our city. Thank you for the time.
Okay. Thank you so much. After Brian, next person we'll be hearing from is Malcolm Heflin, and then on to Dr. Malcolm would be Chrissy Powell. We have about 8 more folks giving testimony this evening, so thank you for sticking with us and for your diligence. We look forward to hearing from all of you. So next, Malcolm.
There we are.
Yeah, we'll start over.
There you go. We're good. I'd like to thank all of you for giving me time to speak with you tonight. And I'm here to talk with you about the effects of medical debt on our communities and why Progressive Maryland would like to ask members of this delegation to sponsor the effort to amend medical debt collection. Even before the pandemic, tens of thousands of Marylanders had to wrangle with medical debts against well-paid lawyers in a system that does its best to create obfuscation and confusion. Last year, while I was canvassing in support of HB 1420, I talked to a woman who had been rushed to the ER for COPD recently. And because she had insurance, she assumed that the cost of her hospital visit would be covered. So you can imagine her surprise when she was presented with a bill for over $5,000 that was already in collection. I was the first person at that point who had actually even told her anything about charity care or any kind of charity care program. And she realized once I showed her that she would have qualified had she been asked. But during she was never asked at any point, not during intake, not during discharge, not at any point afterwards about this. It wasn't until she was being sued. There are thousands of people across Maryland who have to deal with this. People who lived on fixed incomes, people who lived in underserved communities. There is even a story about someone who's dealing with the stress of this, and the stress of this was so much that it wore down their mental health. But even before COVID, these are stories that happened to tens of thousands of our friends across the state. This year's Medical Debt Protection Act will prevent hospitals from putting liens on private residences and vehicles, and require hospitals to create payment plans that doesn't take more than 5% of a patient's monthly income. It will also make harder to sue patients with small amounts of medical debt, which disproportionately are held by Marylanders in underserved communities. Medical debt in our for-profit healthcare system has robbed too many Marylanders of their livelihoods and homes pre-COVID. And with this unfolding economic crisis, this is a problem that will only grow if we don't address it now. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for the testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Chris Powell, and then on deck would be Donna Brown. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Chrissy Powell, and I am the Executive Director of Fight Back Baltimore. We provide free and inclusive training, digital skills, and tech certification training to underserved communities. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition and the team lead for the digital skills team. We define digital literacy skills as having the ability to complete basic computer tasks, such as turning on a mouse, navigating the internet, or sending an email. This sounds pretty basic to some of us, but for a lot of us, this is a challenge. A May 2020 report from the National Skills Coalition revealed that 31% of U.S. workers ages 16 to 64 have limited to zero digital skills. Taking that number, and let's bring that residents and aging adult populations, we can easily assume that at least 50% of Baltimore residents lack basic digital literacy skills. Of course, workers of color are overrepresented among those with digital skills gaps. Now, COVID-19 has proven to all of us that digital literacy skills are not only necessary to succeed in the workspace, but it is a necessity for everyday living and to be a functioning member of society. Digital literacy skills training and technical support must be available for all, equipping our residents with the skills and resources needed to, one, apply for jobs, attend virtual doctor's appointments and telehealth appointments, applying for and accessing state benefits, participating in online education, or simply staying connected with friends and family to avoid social isolation. It is a responsibility of our community digital literacy skills developed and supported to provide free and accessible training and technical support to our residents. Digital literacy skills are no longer a luxury, but a human right, and I urge our appointments to act accordingly and urgently. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that testimony. I know we're fighting through technology that doesn't seem to always be on our side, but I appreciate everyone's diligence because the things we're talking about are clearly that important. The next person we'll be hearing from is Donna Brown with Darlene Kane on deck. Donna?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to our local delegation for sticking it out this long. I know we're far past our timeline. I represent CJSJ, Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, Citizens Policing Project, and am lead advisor for Making Change, all advocacy organizations around police reforms and social justice reforms within the city of Baltimore. I've served in the city also as a minister and am a former chaplain for our Baltimore Police Department. Hence, it's because of my direct engagement with BPD that I have absolute belief in its possible transformation. However, that's not without the direct influence from the people who live and work in the city. So I'm asking in this moment for the restoration of local control to Baltimore's police department, to our local government. Without the direct influence from the people of the city, there's no real possible change of reform that in the interest of the citizens that police department serves is charged to serve and protect. What better means of dismantling the barriers between BPD and the residents of Baltimore City than giving the residents and their elected representatives who share their experiences as representatives as well as residents to be able the capability of working together to create the accountability necessary for reforms within our police department. That our police department is governed by a delegation of elected officials who do not live here, like most of our officers, reinforces the most egregious form of control and lack of accountability to the residents of this city, and doesn't regard or its citizens nor its representatives that they are charged to serve.
Thank you so much, Donna, for that testimony. It's greatly appreciated, and thank you for sticking with us for this evening. We're rounding out to the last few folks, so we're just deeply appreciative of that testimony. Next, we're going to hear from Darlene Kane, and then next on deck would be Marceline White. We can hear you now.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, members of Baltimore City Delegation, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm Darlene Kane. I'm president and founder of Mothers on the Move. I'm also a member of CJSJ, which is Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs. Also a counselor for youth for trauma and grief from 3rd to 5th grade. I'm a mentee for Baltimore City for youth to young adults up to 21, 25 years old. I also have a new practice called DK Wellness. I'm here tonight behind you in Baltimore City, asking you to please support the Maryland Trust Act, because we have students, teachers, mothers, grandparents, and great-grandparents who are all out here trying to do the visual learning and who a lot don't have the skills to be on the computer. So I'm definitely supporting them as well, and thankful to hear all the teachers and people that spoke tonight. Also, I'm asking you for support for our essential workers, because without them, we will not be able to have our food, our health care, postal workers, and the removal of our trash from the DPW. So I'm asking you for that. And lastly, I'm asking you, and while you're having my voice to be heard tonight, thank you, is to repeal the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. No officer is above the law, and also local control. And because of COVID-19,
30 seconds.
because of COVID-19, there's been a lot of education changes in education. So to keep the students encouraged and engaged, we ask you to continue to help us with creativity and Wi-Fi and things that we need. I try to do creativity with my youth to keep them engaged and want to continue to be engaged. Thank you for having my time, and we all want Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that testimony. We have 4 folks remaining that appear to be present with us. Next on deck will be Marceline White, followed by Rob Farrell.
Good evening, Chair Smith, Chair McCray, members of the Baltimore City Delegation. Thank you for this great and transparent hearing. My name is Marceline White. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition, MCRC, and MCRC works to advance economic justice and financial inclusion through research, education, advocacy, and direct service. I appreciate your time tonight. I'm here to ask for the delegation's support of the Medical Debt Protection Act. As you've heard throughout this evening,
we are facing both a health and wealth crisis in our city and within our state. As everyone here is aware, COVID cases are rising, as well as people who are facing serious long-term consequences of COVID-19, and the mortality rates are also rising. At the same time, we're facing a financial crisis. A number of people that have experienced job loss through unemployment, through small business closures, and through their own health complications is rising. And we know that these health effects disproportionately affect Black and Brown communities, both as those who've been laid off from work and shed from certain jobs, as well as those who are essential workers working day and night to provide essential services and at risk for exposure of COVID-19. We also know, because of health disparities, many residents in Baltimore City in Black and Brown neighborhoods, formerly Red Line neighborhoods, experience more vulnerabilities to serious consequences of COVID-19. So because of that, we're asking you to act this session to address some of these issues through the Medical Debt Protection Act. Hospital care in Maryland, on average, for a 4-day stay costs $14,200, which is unaffordable for so many of our residents. And we know that when you can't afford to pay a bill, our hospitals have sued patients to collect this medical debt. Between 2009 and 2018, Maryland hospitals, primarily Baltimore-based hospitals, sued 30,000 Baltimore City residents for unpaid hospital debt. The average amount owed was $982. So these are people who, if they had $1,000 they could get on their credit card or from their family members, they would pay off the debt. They don't have the money. So it's affecting our low-income consumers primarily.
Time is up.
Up? Okay. Well, we'd ask you to take action and protect the debt. You've heard from others about why it's so critical.
Thank you so much for that testimony. Next, we'll be hearing from Rob Farrell, and then on deck, Molly Mitchell.
Good evening, members of the city delegation. I'm Rob Farrell. I'm a senior organizer with Organizing Black, a grassroots organization fighting for the collective liberation of Black people here in Baltimore and beyond, and also CJSJ, the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs. In the midst of a global pandemic, I, along with tens of thousands of Baltimore residents, were in the streets for over a month this summer demanding accountability and transparency from our Baltimore City Police Department. And the time is now for our legislators to act on our behalf. There are 3 key initiatives that we'd like y'all to focus on in this session. Number 1, Baltimore needs local control of its police force. Number 2, abolish the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. And number 3, reform the Maryland Public Information Act to allow disclosure of all complaints of police misconduct. Number 1, Black people in Baltimore would benefit from local control of BPD. BPD is under consent decree right now due to its widespread targeting of Black folks and unconstitutional policing practices that disproportionately impact Black residents. We don't have the ability to hold our elected officials like our mayor and city council accountable, so we're here to hold y'all accountable. BPD will never be fully accountable to its residents without local control, so we ask you to move on that. BPD officers should have the same due process as Black residents of Baltimore. Imagine what that would look like for how they would act towards us. Police should be treated the same as any other citizen when suspected of committing a crime every step of the way. Leah Board,
30 seconds.
Investigation and discipline processes. And lastly, reforming MPIA. We need access to our police records and personnel files to be able to actually hold them accountable. We don't know who the habitual officers that are committing these acts of violence on our community are. And if we had their records, we'd be able to be more vigilant and specifically target their ousting from the BPD. So I thank you all for your time and attention and working on these specific bills for Black Baltimore residents.
Thank you for hanging till the 4th quarter. Few seconds remaining. We're real appreciative. The next person we're going to hear from is Molly Mitchell, and then on deck will be Frank Patinella.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the members of the Baltimore City Delegation. It's such a pleasure to be able to talk with you this evening. I'm talking to you tonight as a volunteer with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. And I want to talk to you about the Climate Solutions Now bill. This is a bill that was passed by 2 committees in the Senate last year, and it was on track to pass last year, but of course the session was shortened due to the COVID pandemic. So this is a great bill. It's supported by the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, by the League of Conservation Voters, by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Energy Foundation, the Maryland Legislative Coalition. So this bill would do 4 things. Number one, it's going to require that Maryland reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by mandating that it get to carbon net neutral by 2045. Number two, it's going to invest resources in overburdened communities by creating a work group that will make recommendations about what percent of the state funds that are spent on reaching our climate goals will be spent in overburdened communities. It will also, third, create a work group that will protect workers in the fossil fuel industry. And finally, it's going to enact simple, effective policies to reduce our emissions, such as planting 5 million trees by the year 2030, by increasing the Empower program's gains in energy efficiency
30
from
seconds.
5 to 3%. So this is a bill that's going to get us in line with the science, in line with what the UN's panel on climate change says is necessary for wealthy states and wealthy nations to do in order to achieve our climate goals. So we urge you to make sure that Maryland, our state, and our nation and our country are able to have a livable future and help to pass the Climate Solutions Now bill in 2021. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that testimony. Next up will be Frank Pantanella. And if Reverend Kobe Little is still with us, okay, I just got a text. It was like a magic. As soon as I said that, I got a text saying that Josh Harris would give his remarks on his behalf. So, I mean, couldn't choreograph that better. So we'll hear from Frank Pantanella and then give opportunity for Reverend Kobe Little to be channeled through Joshua Harris. Frank, are you still there? I think I see you still logged in. If he's having some, digital challenges, I think it'd be okay. Josh, are you okay to stand in and give Reverend Little's? Oh, wait. It looks like Frank says he's unmuted and the video's on. I'm not hearing him. Is anyone else hearing Frank? Yeah, there may be an issue with your microphone, Frank. You might want to just double check to make sure that your settings are adequate, because sometimes they are in conflict with your camera. So you just might want to double check that compatibility there. As you figure that out, maybe this would be a good time, Joshua, for you to step in on Reverend Little's behalf.
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me? Can you all hear me?
You sound good.
All right, great. Great. I just wanted to make sure. Again, thank you all so much for holding on. I'll be brief. To the chairwoman, Smith, thank you so much. On behalf of the Baltimore NAACP, my name is Joshua Harris. We're concerned about a few things this legislative session. Number one, in the middle of this pandemic, we're extremely concerned about the Maryland General Assembly's plans for open and accessible government during this session. Of particular concern are the caps on the number of participants who can testify during hearings. We believe the technology allows for more participation, not less, and the NAACP expects to see that reflected this legislative session. Number two, we'd like to see our legislature support 5 police reforms. Number one, local control of BPD. As you've already heard, several organizations and individuals testify about the importance of that for us to be able to hold our police officers accountable in Baltimore City. Number two, police accountability and repealing the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. This needs to be repealed as it is a critical matter of civil rights and a moral issue that has set a precedent of separate and unequal in the application of law and rights. Police officers should not have a separate set of rights than citizens. The amount of money that we have paid out in the last 10 years for lawsuits against police officers is absurd and only perpetuates problems that empower corrupt officers like the Gun Trace Task Force. Third issue we'd like to see you support is police transparency and the MPIA reform. Fourth,
30 seconds.
Use of force reform. And then fifth, eliminating police in our schools. We know that the psychological impact they can have on our students and how it can perpetuate the school to prison pipeline. Other issues that we're extremely concerned about are the funding of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future and making sure that we overturn the governor's veto, making sure that we support the Maryland Essential Workers Protection Act. We know that over the last year, we have seen the importance of our essential workers and those who work in our grocery stores, who drive our buses, our trains, and who are on the front line.
Time is
We
up.
need to make sure that we have COVID protections for our essential workers and that we strengthen the safety of the most vulnerable amongst us. And lastly, ensuring that economic development.
I'm sorry, thank you so much. We have to wrap up. We appreciate that testimony and you jumping in at the last minute on behalf of your colleagues. So thank you so much. We have one additional attempt to make sure we have Frank Pantanella. He's been with us from the very beginning to ensure that he's able to speak. Frank, are you having some better luck now? Yeah, I'm checking the chat. It looks like we're just having some glitches. We're not really certain what's wrong. But I tell you this, Frank, if there's any written testimony that you want to share, all written testimony will be provided to the full delegation for them to review. And we just regret, this is just a further illustration of the difficulty our residents and neighbors and friends are having utilizing the internet to carry out their life. So I want to just say, apologies that we're having this challenge and this challenge rather. And we've had several people attempt and reattempt to participate this evening, and through no fault of their own, we've just had some challenges in that regard. So I just want to extend my sincere apologies of the infrastructure reality we see ourselves faced with, because this evening, despite its best intentions, illustrates the very challenges our neighbors and friends and others are facing in the world that we're in right now. And it just, to me, reinvigorates the fight to ensure that we work for real scalable solutions to this problem. I just want to say that, for folks, it would be in your best interest to submit testimony written if you would like to by the end of the week, if you've already provided testimony. That way we can make sure everyone has this information with sufficient time to review it in advance of session. So please, email us by the end of the week with that information. At this point, I just want to say my sincere thanks to my colleagues, to the advocates, to the residents that shared their visions, their ideas, and I'm humbled and also excited. As dark and challenging as this time can be, if not for all of us working collectively, aware of our collective talents and strengths, we wouldn't be able to hope for a more, transformational, inclusive, and highly productive Baltimore if we aren't actually engaging with each other now. So I know that this was hours of describing so many of the challenges in Baltimore, but we are the solutions right here, not only within this hearing, but with all the many eyes that viewed the hearing, and for those who just care deeply and because of the inequitable broadband reality couldn't log in. So I just want to say thank you to my colleagues and extend an opportunity to my fellow chair of the Senate delegation, Corey McCray, to give closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't belabor the point. I think that you did a great job. I just want to once again recognize my colleagues, Senator Mary Washington, Senator Antonio Hayes, Senator Sidnor, Senator Ferguson, and Senator Joe Carter, who joined in. I know that we all heard the voices loud and clear in reference to a number of the initiatives that are important to our respective constituents throughout the city, and look forward to working with you all in reference to the upcoming legislative session. Once again, I think that I speak for everyone on this call and just want to say thank you, Madam Chair, and a very tight ship. That this was done, it wouldn't have been done just by yourself, but you have your staff, Crystal York, who did a phenomenal job. So I just wanted to thank you, and I'm sure that on behalf of all my colleagues, we all feel the same. So thank you for your leadership.
And I thank you, Peter. I just want to make sure I lift up my new ledge director, Lamar Robinson. The ominous voice that alerted you to your time was fleeting. So I just want to thank you, because you had a hard job, and we appreciate the work and stepping up. So thank you so much. All right, so long. Have a good evening. Thank you to the people of Baltimore. Have a good evening.
Good evening.